So it's kind of a crazy story. There's a YouTuber named Hunter Avallone. We've had him on the show before, I think a couple of years ago. And I had no idea that he lived I guess he lived like a couple doors down from our building in Martinsburg, West Virginia, where we have people currently doing work. And I just started finding the story out like an hour ago, not even. Some guy showed up. So he's dating someone. That woman's ex-boyfriend came with a shotgun, fired through the door, striking the woman, trying to kill Hunter Avallone. At least it appears according to text messages that were released. And I don't know, it's just crazy. A little shook up. I had to, call family because it's just, I don't know, it's a crazy story. There's a bunch of political stuff, obviously. You've got this fake story running, Vivek Ramaswamy wanting to run as the Libertarian candidate. I don't believe that's real. The Vivek's team has refuted it, saying this is outright lies. And it looks like just before the Iowa, it's a caucus, right? Iowa caucuses.
Correct.
They're trying to spike the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign. So this is crazy. A lot of crazy things happen around the world, but considering Hunter Avallone has been a guest on the show, he's a political commentator. I figure we'll go over this one and just, we'll definitely talk about this. And we'll talk about a bunch of other stuff. We've got news about the Iowa caucus and Ron DeSantis. Ron and his team basically calling for people outside the state to come and caucus. So that one's, I don't know, not a good story. We've got, I think it's Missouri. I'll have to double check because my brain is wrapped around this. Holy crap. Some dude just, the guy got into a shootout with the cops, took his own life. I mean, this story's crazy. And this happened down, effectively next door to our building where we have people. And, kind of, wow, I'm just kind of screwed up over it. But Missouri, I think it is, wants to make a abortion murder. So, we'll definitely talk about that. But we do have an awesome guest who rescued 255 people.
Yeah.
Is that it? 255 people. And that's not even the first time you've done it. So we're going to get into this. Before we do, ladies and gentlemen, man, it is really hard to follow through with the promo after reading all of this stuff and seeing what's going on, near us. But head over to thebestsongever.com and you can pre-order on iTunes and Amazon. You want to switch to the other view because we can't actually see the pre-order.
Oh, yeah. I understand. There you go.
So there you go. The pre-order on Amazon and iTunes. Together Again, the best song ever. It is the greatest song ever written. Everyone agrees. And I can say that because I didn't write it. Jeremy Boring of the Daily Wire did. And so this is the culmination of some really big music industry FUs, a big middle finger we're giving. I probably shouldn't say that considering we're trying to basically game the music industry as it is. But, between us and the Daily Wire, we kind of want to stick it to the big fat cats in the music industry and every industry, basically, that is taken over by woke garbage and nonsense. And so what we did was we did a cover version in a modern synth pop style of Jeremy Boring and Michael Knowles' Smokey Mike and the God King song. It is officially launching on the 15th. You can pre-order on iTunes and Amazon right now and go to thebestsongever.com, pre-order it, because what we're hoping to do is just, sell a bunch of these songs, have it be have an impact, and just let them know we are giving them the middle finger. So with your support, if you're a fan of modern pop, I guess you'll like it. A lot of people seem to like the song. Shout out to Carter Banks for producing it. Also become a member over at timcast.com by clicking join us, support our work directly so we can continue. We can do things like give a big middle finger. But the music video is dropping on the 15th. In the super early hours of the morning, and Michael Knowles and Jeremy Boring do make an appearance, as well as Phil Labonte, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. So that will be all throughout next week. We're going to be promoting it, and you can pre-order it now. Joining us tonight to talk about this and all of the people that he rescued and the amazing work he's doing is Rep. Cory Mills.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
welcome back. Yeah, who are you? What do you do?
So I represent the congressional district for Florida 7, which is pretty much just outside of Orlando, all of Seminole County and South Volusia area. I live out in the New Smyrna Beach area, so out in the outer islands. But it's good to be back. It's been a while.
Right on, man. Yeah, and the big story is if we Google it and it's like Rep. Cory Mills rescues 30 people. And I'm like, we need an updated story on this because it's been a few months. I mean, certainly that's not the full number. And you actually, and it's not the first time you've done this, even with Afghanistan. You helped organize rescue flights to get in and bring people out.
Well, and then we actually conducted, so in 2021, obviously prior to me being elected, we actually conducted the very first successful overland rescue of Americans that had ever been done. It was a woman and 3 children from Amarillo, Texas. I mean, these are born and raised Amarillo, Texas natives out of Ronnie Jackson's district, out of Texas 13. And, when I saw what was happening, I mean, just the barbarism, the horrific incidents that was occurring with Hamas, the terrorist organization that's an Iranian-backed organization that was just slaughtering Israelis and others there in the Gaza area, I knew that this administration was going to do absolutely nothing. They had no plan. They had no strategy. They had no actual contingencies. And so by October 10th, I was already on a plane. And by October 11th, I was conducting the first rescue, which was by ground, which was from Tiberias and Haifa, Nazareth. We pulled 32 out the first day. Second day throughout the West Bank, Jerusalem, south of Jerusalem, towards the Gaza area. We pulled another 45. But in total, we ended up getting 96 out through ground rescue, 159 out through air rescue. And also shout out to the Nazareth group and Glenn Beck and all those guys who've been doing amazing work, who was supporting some of the stuff that we were doing. We're trying to get charters out. But we ended up getting about 255 people out on the second rescues, and then probably about 36 or so out in Afghanistan in 2021. So I don't know if my routine is necessarily just serving in Congress or trying to do Joe Biden's job when he screws up everywhere else.
Yeah, I guess. But we'll get into all that stuff. So thanks for hanging out. It's going to be a blast. We've got Hannah Claire Brimelow, of course.
Hi, I'm Hannah Claire Brimelow. I'm a writer for SCNR.com. That's Scanner News. It's the best. I'm working on some coverage of the Martinsburg story as we speak right now. I'm excited to get into this.
Yes, Ian Crossland, dude, Cory, it's great to see you, man. I can sense the humility just oozing out of you now since you've joined Congress. I can feel it in you, man. Like what that must be.
Yeah, last time you were here, you weren't in Congress.
You were running.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure you were campaigning. Wow, and now it's just like, ooh, you're like, it's like you've like matured in a way, but I can only imagine what the last year has been like.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've been really lucky. Like while I've been in Congress, I got put on some really amazing committees. I mean, I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm on the Intelligence Special Operations Subcommittee, Military Personnel Subcommittee, Oversight Accountability Subcommittees. I mean, it's been a good time. Like we actually are being effective through the experience and merit that, we kind of built through everything. Unlike where you see most of the time when you go in there, it's, who's kissed the ring and, how much money did you donate? And so, Congress is certainly a broken institution, but I think that the 118th Congress, kind of the America First Patriots, has come in. We're trying to do our best to repair that and get back to constitutionality.
Yeah, and common sense, man. Like talk about technology. Well, we'll get into it on the show because we got Serge on my right over here. What's happening, bro?
Yeah, I'm here kind of trying to react to the news we got today. It's just crazy to think that happened in Martinsburg. Anyways, yeah, Serge.com. Let's get to it.
So here's the first story. This is local news for us out of Martinsburg, West Virginia. Officer involved shooting in Martinsburg results in suspect taking his own life. This is YouTuber Hunter Avallone. He's been a guest on this show. He's a political commentator. He was with his girlfriend. Her ex showed up attempting to, it would appear, to kill Hunter Avallone, and ended up shooting his ex. And then when police arrived on scene, and this was West Virginia State Police. This is, I believe, the Martinsburg City Police, as well as, I think I'm hearing rumors even Harper's Ferry may have responded, maybe after the fact. There's Hunter posted the video. You can't see anything. You can hear the gunshots. I don't know exactly what happened. The guy apparently had a shotgun, and so I'll show you this tweet. This is from Hunter. I want to say this. I mean, you got to be a bit in the weeds to know Hunter Avallone. He's a political commentator, but it's not. I'm not trying to be a dick or anything. He's not the biggest political commentator, but he has been on the show before, and we had no idea he lived like 2 buildings down from us. From our Martinsburg building, where this is where we're building the coffee shop. It's where we're building the skate shop. So this is local news to us. And he tweeted this. I'm still trying to process this, and I'm most likely in shock as I write this. But only a few hours ago, Holly's ex-boyfriend Conrad showed up at my apartment building with a shotgun. He shot through my building door, injuring Holly's leg in the process. I recorded the final moments in which we were hiding on the back porch. You can hear him shoot at police before ultimately taking his own life in my own effing apartment hallway. I'm still trying to process this. Holly and I are physically okay, but mentally this is going to do some serious damage. Holly has been amazing, and she's been incredibly brave and strong throughout this ordeal. He posted this. He said this was Conrad's final text message with Holly after she'd been injured. She said, "Please surrender. I'm losing a lot of blood." The shooter responds, "I never meant that. No. God damn it. Leave him, please." She said, "Only if you surrender." And he said, "I will. Just live your life for yourself." And then he says, "I should have killed the coward." So when firing through that door, it appears the this guy went to Hunter's house to kill him, and there's more to this. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I just, you know what, man. First and foremost, I'll just say it this way: the reports from the police are that they went to the hospital. It's superficial injuries. Looks like Hunter's girlfriend's going to be okay, so I'm glad to hear that. I sent him a message, but he should take care of himself. Whatever. He's a couple buildings down from us, but this is crazy, and for me, why I think this is so important. I mean, it's important you guys take security seriously. It's important you guys understand the right to keep and bear arms.
That's right.
Hunter should not have been. He should not have been hiding on his back porch. I mean, maybe he should have. I don't know. He's in West Virginia. I just got to say, man, he should have a weapon. I don't know what else to say. I don't know.
I mean, I think that we live in a time that we have to understand that not only is there a massive amount of mental illness that's kind of going around, but we also have to acknowledge that there's really been this kind of devaluation on human life. I mean, you're starting to see this calloused approach toward taking, human lives mean absolutely nothing. And so I think that we live in a day and age, and unfortunately, that we should, and I would encourage people to be able to defend their own homes, to understand stand your ground and understand your castle law, to understand, the ability to try and protect your family, which is ultimately our inalienable right under our Second Amendment, right? So,
and this is why every argument made by every anti-gun, anti-2A person is going to be like, that man should not have had a gun. Oh, good luck, man. That's such a ridiculous argument. Crazy guy is going to find a weapon. You can 3D print them, right? So I'm not here to cast anything on Hunter. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I'm just saying, I hope in the future he looks to his personal defense for his home. He's in a constitutional carry state. He can do it, and he should. But I am glad the police were there and were able to assist him.
I always give the most kudos ever to our first responders, who are just amazing people. I mean, these are the individuals that run towards fire when everyone's running around, running away. These are the people that run towards gunfire when other people are running away. I mean, just the bravery of our men and women in uniform. I just don't think it can be understated, and how much we should appreciate what they do.
Dude, you mentioned the devaluation of human life that's kind of been a trend. And I was just talking to Dr. Drew earlier on my show and interviewed him. It was great talk. We talked about narcissism. It came up. And I was like, what does that mean? That means I love myself? Because so he's like, no, it means like when you're a kid, and it becomes like your bonding mechanisms become a threat. So you go inward and you kind of soothe yourself by ignoring others. And then you start to lose. He explained it way better. He wrote a book on it. But I don't know if it's the age, if it's the internet, all the video games people are diving into, it's because if it's being kids set in front of a YouTube for 3 hours when the mom's in the kitchen just doing whatever. If it's the drugs, like the pharmaceuticals, that kids are like moms on amphetamines that are giving birth to kids that have hard time with their gut biomes. If it's all of it. And
I think it's all of it. I think it's a culmination of so many things, not to mention the fact that you have 22, 23-year-olds who've never knew America without being at a time of war. I mean...
Yeah, what's that about, man? The war weariness. What is that? Like a kid is told this is normal, this is what we are, and it's but that's horrible. To be, in my opinion, conquest and colonization of Iraq, attempted Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, it's disgusting. It's just for oil as far as I can tell, or for resources. But to be told this is how it is. Hell, welcome to the greatest country on earth. We're conquesting all these other countries.
Well, but the problem is like we were talking about before the show started. I mean, you've got this kind of neoconservative, neoliberal, liberal kind of interventionist mindset where they think that all of our, warfare is still based in a kinetic realm of gun to gun, bomb to bomb, bullet to bullet. And they completely ignore the fact that the evolution of warfare is now into the non-kinetic kind of information warfare, propaganda warfare, economic resource supply chain and cyber. I mean, these are the areas that we need to be focusing on. And I'm not an interventionist, but I'm not isolationist, right? We need to be protectionists and understand, though, that there's certain things that have nothing to do with us. I would look at Ukraine as one of the biggest models of that. And so for me, the reasons why we went into Iraq, which lost, almost 1 million plus innocent lives. No one, I've spent 7 years of my life in Iraq. I spent almost 3 years of my life in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Pakistan, North Somalia, all these areas. One of the things that I've learned is that any government at the end of war can try and claim a victory, but no one wins when it comes to war. You're always going to have certain amounts of collateral damage. You're always going to have certain people who are going to lose their life who shouldn't. You're always going to make sure that you're going to lose someone's brothers and uncles and fathers and husbands and things like this in these wars. And so we need to stop treating lives as if we're pawns on a chessboard somewhere that we can just basically move to play political football. We have to be smart in how we not only protect our American people, but we protect our treasures and we protect our ability to be able to be strong again. We have to get America First agenda back on the block, and we have to stop this interventionist mindset of the 1980s.
I watched, I think it was Clint Russell retweeted, this is from a few days ago, some graphic of like veterans suicide, how the deaths of active military, and it's like suicide is like 15, 18% in 1980, and then it goes up and over the years, and now it's at like 45% of active. What the fuck does that work? What in the hell? And that's just people that are actually there in the military getting the brunt.
I also contribute that to a little bit of the wokeness that's basically continue to try and utilize this indoctrinating kind of process where in our military, it's one of the things that we strived so hard for, myself, Matt Gates, Jim Banks, Ronnie Jackson, I mean, so many of the members of our Armed Services Committee, and especially the MilPER subcommittee, was to get away from this idea that meritocracy no longer can exist, and it's all about the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI. What we really need to be focusing on for our military, which is what it used to be focused on, is things like increased lethality, readiness, and being properly equipped. Those are the three things I want to see out of my military. And I think that what we're bringing in now is drag shows and, transsexual, gender affirming surgeries and travel abortion that's being paid for by the federal government, things like this that in no way, I mean, what we should be thinking about is how do we improve the quality of life? How do we get military construction, MilCon in place that allows the housing availability and affordability to be better for our armed forces? How can we actually make sure that instead of just having 2 days a week for childcare for the spouses of those who serve, we have it all day, every day, so they can have careers of their own? It's like we should be thinking about improving the quality of life of our armed service members, but also let's start prioritizing our veterans over illegal aliens who are basically invading our nation. I mean,
think we
these are
don't
priorities.
because American culture has shifted into being sort of anti-military? I think that there's sort of a disconnect between the way people used to feel.
I mean, this
about
administration has almost become anti-American.
Oh, they're 100% anti-American.
It's not even
but
American anti-military.
Day-to-day American personality. I mean, you see this reflected in military recruitment. People don't want to join the military.
We've got 33,000 recruitment deficit right now. I mean, you're talking 3 military divisions.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, one of the amendments that I tried to pass, that I tried to put in that CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, tried to say scored, which is nonsense. I wanted us to basically look at the fact that these vaccination purging is unconstitutional and that we should bring back our military service members. We should give them the back pay that's necessary. They shouldn't have to pay any bonuses back because at the end of the day, they were to serve our government, or I should say serve our nation, not to serve our government's agenda. And so, and meanwhile, they were like, no, sorry, this scores. So you can't put it in as an amendment. It's just ridiculous what we're seeing right now. I guess I have to agree to some extent. It is an anti-military, but anti-American agenda.
Do you think there's a way to shift culture away from that? I mean, there's always going to be politicians who are sort of anti-military or who see, more conservative takes on the military and conservative values as a threat. But do the day-to-day Americans ultimately want to say, oh, you're a returning vet, I don't care about you? Because that's really what a lot of communities
you said the exact
them.
thing in the earlier part of your statement, which is politicians. They're actually the biggest part of the problem. We don't need politicians. We need statesmen. Mm-hmm. We need veterans who've actually served in uniform who understand exactly what our warfighters need to be able to move forward. Mm-hmm. We have to have the necessary resources and assets, not being pre-allocated to another country to where they can actually worry about the PTSD and the trauma that the other nation's going through and ignoring our own veterans here at home. We have to just get back to statesmen who understand what the America First approach is and start prioritizing the American citizens.
We had Tom Sauer on a couple of days ago, and he's like privatized. He's taking it into his own hands. They have a private company. It's Miramar Health, and they're wholly focused on helping veterans rehabilitate themselves through whatever kind of therapy, whether it's I think they're looking into psychedelic therapy as well, like MDMA therapy. But it's a lot of it's about communication and I don't think the government can handle it. I think it needs to be in the private sector, like the VA. I don't know a lot about it, but I hear complaints for 20 years. People have been complaining about how ineffective it is. So I don't know if you.
It is ineffective, and I'll even go a step further. The problem with all of government is that the metric of success is completely skewed. Their idea by gauging what is a metric of success is the idea of how much should I spend. And they continue to try and say, oh, well, we spent more this year than we'd ever spent before. Oh, we increased veterans by 20%. Oh, we did this. What they're not doing is gauging it by the true metric of how many people did you actually help? What is the outcome in which we're looking at where we're able to say we went from 21 or 22 veteran suicides a day down to 18? What was that cost in order to do that? Because let me tell you, if I could get it down to 0, give me that number. But you also have them where they'll go ahead and say, oh, we just built another VA hospital. Well, yeah, you just spent $1 billion on this new VA hospital in a metropolitan area that already has 9 other hospitals which have the same exact levels of care. Why wouldn't you put that to a rural area where people can actually get treatment and open it up to where all of our veterans can basically utilize the existing, medical treatments and facilities that are actually existing there already? I mean, this is the thing. Veterans don't necessarily need to have like a special hospital. There's hospitals who offer a lot of these same things, but we do need them in the rural communities. We do need to understand how do we treat and how do we give the necessary resources and assets. I mean, the military veteran as a whole is very traditional. We believe in things like being able to, as a man, for example, the idea to be able to protect my family, to be able to provide for my family. And so when we come out and we essentially have no way to supply and, keep up with the 40-year high inflation and the cost of living that's out of control and untenable, or we don't have the housing affordability and availability for a soldier any longer. And so they don't feel like a man because they can't protect and provide for their family. So that loses their objective, their mission, their focus. And I think that then they start chasing, well, something must be wrong. I'm getting into a depressed state. And here's the other problem that we have to acknowledge. The pharmaceutical companies have continued, just with the doctors, to want to overprescribe and over-medicate every single person, thinking that that's the solution.
Well, they benefit when you're sick, and they can prescribe you something for all the side effects that they have caused.
But they want to keep you sick for as long as possible because that's how they actually make their money.
Yeah, they benefit when you're sick.
Is that how it is in the VA too?
That's exactly how it is. Oh, you have an issue? Here's a script. Oh, that pain's still bothering you, and the last pain pills that we didn't give you is enough. Let me increase the dosage. And I'm not saying that we don't have great medical care providers, but what we do have is we've got a conflict of interest when you have people who actually are able to, it's the same thing with, legislators who are able to trade in the stock market, even though they can make legislation that manipulates the stock price. You have doctors who, of course, are going to invest in the pharmaceutical companies of the, things that they prescribe the most, right? Because they understand. So there's just a lot that we have to fix in this country. But the first thing is we have to get back to understanding, what does it mean to be on an America First agenda again?
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend joining the military to like an 18-year-old today?
I would. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we've got one of the strongest, greatest volunteer forces. I was proud to have served in uniform, and I think it's a great honor. I think it's something that if you're born with that servant leadership heart, and a lot of us, we used to joke that we must be wired wrong, right? But the reality is that you're just born with a servant leadership heart. You are or you're not. And the thing that why I ran, one of the big things was not just to look out for our military veterans, but to ensure that our military has all the national, the resources, the assets, and that they get back to the priorities that they should be focused on, so that men and women can actually serve, not thinking about this woke agenda or this DEI over meritocracy type of thing for, equity over equality. I mean, it's just this idea of us building back our military on the principles and the beliefs of what it originally started from.
I want to introduce a super soldier program where you can be like, you want to do experimental gene therapy and be able to run 3 times faster, not have to breathe every 8 minutes. You want to see 90 times further.
I feel like you're volunteering for it.
That's what I'm talking about, dude. I will be the first. And but I think so many young people maybe don't have a purpose, and like the idea that you could become a badass, and it's all on you though, because it may or may not work. It may work, but like you can sign up for this. I think it would increase.
Or we could have the X-Men, I guess, at some point.
That's what I'm talking about. It's because it's happening anyway, man. In China, they're doing CRISPR. They are building super soldiers. So why don't we just do it publicly? We don't have to disclose all the results.
I honestly just wish that we could even get back to the idea of not having drag shows on our military installations. So you're light years ahead on that already.
You mentioned.
I was going to say, I feel like because recruitment standards are so, or like we're not meeting recruitment goals right now, they're more likely to want to lower all of the physical standards rather than start recruiting for potential super soldiers.
Well, I mean, look.
Although maybe you can make a super soldier out of anybody. I don't really know how it works.
I always say that one of the things that plagues this nation is that we have a crisis in leadership. And, the issues that we're seeing right now, yes, it does start at the commander-in-chief, but it also, I look at the Secretary of Defense, who I've actually issued impeachment articles against and filed those because of his, handling and dereliction of duty, if you want to, on how Afghanistan went and the botched withdrawal. It cost 13 brave heroes their lives. And I'm blessed that I'll be with Paula Knaus, who is the mother of Ryan Knaus, one of the 13 brave soldiers who had died on August 26th. I'll be with her December 13th, where we'll be going out in Section 60 in Arlington to be able to go ahead and visit her son and pay our respects. But, there has to be accountability again in government. That's really what it matters.
It's Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense.
Austin.
And did he oversee the surrender?
He oversaw a majority of it.
Let's jump to this story from the New York Post and get into the crux of all of this. This is a story that says Florida Rep. Cory Mills flies to Israel to rescue 32 Americans trapped amid fighting. But that was October 12th. That number is much, much higher. And it's not just that you flew missions to save people, rescue people in Israel, is Afghanistan as well.
Right.
So I'd like to start with Afghanistan. If you can talk to us about what happened, how it happened, what prompted you to actually fly in and start getting some of these people out, and then we can get into obviously the Israel stuff.
So I get a call, and I'd known Ronnie Jackson for quite some time. I mean, this is a guy who's a rear admiral who served on the Armed Services Committee, who's a member of Congress. And literally he called me and said, Cory, I've got a problem. He's like, I've tried to reach out to the State Department. I tried to reach out to the Department of Defense. I've tried to see what we could do to try and get some of my constituents who are trapped in Afghanistan, who are being actively hunted right now by the Taliban. And I said, well, who is it? And so he disclosed who it was, and it was a mother and her 3 children, a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old little girl, a 15-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old little girl. And he literally had no idea how to get them out, even though here he is a member of Congress, and he's calling the right people who would have jurisdiction and approval on this authority. And the things that they were telling him was absolutely false. They would tell him, oh, well, she can just call the State Department and they'll direct her. And she did this time and time again to no answer. Or she would text them, just to give you an idea. And I told Ronnie, I said, look, I'm going to go over there. I said, and I won't come back until I get them. And that's one of the things that he's said multiple times. And, we were attempted to be thwarted in our efforts by the Biden administration multiple times. I mean, even had them scramble an F-16 to do a flyover to try and intimidate us, even though we had approved landing permits on a PPR. And we're in an American aircraft with American former special operations guys to save Americans. And it's our own government who's trying to put us at risk. But, after 11 days, we ended up conducting this successful overland rescue, which is the first of its kind. 2.5 weeks later, after Miriam and her children are already in Amarillo, Texas, they're already back in school. She starts receiving text messages from the State Department saying, hey, we're just reaching out to you to see if you're okay and find out where you're at in Afghanistan. They didn't even know that she had been back safely. I mean, this is the inept and fecklessness of this administration. This is the dereliction of duty by Secretary Lloyd Austin, by Anthony Blinken, the open borders under Mayorkas, the weaponization under Garland and Wray. I mean, all of these people need to be held accountable, but we don't do anything but talk about it. We're more likely to oust someone from our own party than to go after the people who are actually needing to be impeached.
Well, no, I mean, like Bowman should be expelled for the fire alarm thing, but instead it's Santos,
who, by the way, is the first person in history to not be convicted of an actual crime and or committed treason. I mean, look, it's happened 5 times before Santos. 3 people in 1861, which was right after the Confederate, had deemed these individuals to be treasonous, and the other 2 who were convicted felons. And now you got a guy who, and this is why I voted against this expulsion, is that who are we to play judge, juror, and executioner, first off? Who are we to not allow him due process to be able to approach his accusers in his day of court in front of a jury of his peers? Because what this does, in my opinion, is that I think that he has every right to a potential appeal now, because I think that we have in some way could have potentially influenced or started to lead the witnesses in the jury in some way just by our actions in Congress. Because now what we're saying is in America, you are actually guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty.
It's going to prejudice any jury pool because this is national level politics.
That's right.
Can Congress just expel anybody at any time if they vote on it?
Technically, they can.
Okay, so it was everything that happened was above board, but it just is like
but he's not convicted of anything.
And it's a weird precedent to set, right?
It is.
I mean, we just decided that we don't want you here anymore.
Yeah,
there's not an actual crime.
You should have to run that through the Senate or at least by the American people.
Well, and let me be clear. I'm not trying to defend anything that George Santos has done. But what I am defending is the rights to due process for every single American. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of precedence does this set?
It was basically
that's what we have to be thinking about.
The House Ethics Committee report and decision was enough for everyone to say, okay, that's good.
Well, it wasn't everyone.
Not everyone, but for them, enough people to say, okay, we should expel
Unfortunately, but you also had people like a lot of the New Yorkers who were in difficult positions because since he's also from New York, they felt that they had to take action because they were hearing it a lot from their constituents. But also, here's my other thing. Who are we in Congress to basically make a decision to expel someone who was elected by 750,000 people in their district?
Yeah.
We should allow the constituents to be able to do their jobs and to be able to go ahead and carry out their civic duties. And again, this for me is more about protecting your Sixth Amendment, more about protecting the rule of law, and due process, but also protecting the vote of constituents so that they can actually have the rights to elect or not elect whomever they choose.
Yeah, it sounds like it's become a little bit too much of a social club of people that think they're elite and they can just, technically they can still kick each other out, but I do think that That it's like, you don't like my guy? Well, he's my guy.
Well, but think about it. Jamal Bowman admits to doing something wrong while a member of Congress.
Committing a crime.
And actually is charged for that. He gets censured. A guy who does something which was previous in most cases of what his indictments for the grand jury is being accused of, in my understanding, is prior to coming in and has not yet been prosecuted for it, but he gets expelled.
Is it just legit?
We
We
have Bowman on camera. If they were going to expel someone before a conviction, Bowman I would understand as being reasonable because he's on camera.
I don't even justify that, whether it's on camera or not. We should allow the due process to be there. We can't say that we, again, are being judged during execution based on our observance. You are not guilty by the observations in which you make. You are guilty by the rendered verdict by either the judgment of a judge, who we appoint for solid reasons, or the jury, which actually finds their peer guilty. I mean, we just have to understand we're a nation which is based on the rule of law. We're a constitutional republic. And we have to not continue to water that down and dilute it just because it's beneficial for us.
You brought up the impeachment of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, and he was basically largely responsible for the surrender of the American military.
Him and Anthony
Taliban.
Blinken, the Secretary of State.
So what would an impeachment look like? What would be the charges and how would that play out?
My charge on him was the dereliction of duty. I mean, the simple fact that he has a role to play and a job to do. You had soldiers who were deployed who had no rules of engagement, no understanding of what their authorization of force was. I mean, there's people who could have actually, and in one case, a guy named Tyler Vargas, Andrews, I believe is his name, or Tyler Andrew Vargas, I always mess this up. But he was badly injured and is an amputee as a result of the explosion. He was the sniper who was in the tower who actually had identified the potential suicide bomber, had called back what he appeared to be the identified bolo, which is the be on the lookout, had it verified, was asking for a green light to be able to engage, and never received a green light from any of his command because they didn't know who actually had the authority to give that. Moments later, the explosion goes off. 13 brave members have lost their lives. These are things where you should have an escalation of force and a rules of engagement that's established prior to them even being deployed. You should have an understanding of what was going on. And so this was completely just botched from the very beginning. And the fact that there's no one who's been held accountable. And look, when I think about accountability, I think about it as you lead by example. And so it's, for me, I used to call it the concept of windows and mirrors. When something is being done properly, and everything is going successfully, you look through the window at all those outside who are actually delivering on that. But when something goes wrong as a leader, you have to look in the mirror because ultimately it's on you.
This seems like a pattern, though. I mean, there are several Republicans, I think Andy Biggs or is it Biggs or Briggs from Arizona? He brought dereliction of duty impeachment charges against Mayorkas.
Absolutely.
For the border, because the border's a mess. But
I don't think anyone can argue that's not
No,
justified.
Mayorkas should definitely be impeached, but we haven't gotten it yet. I mean, there are lots of members of the Biden administration who I would believe are derelict in duty, but they are still in office. At what point do we get some action? I mean, it must be difficult.
Look, this is what frustrates me. And obviously, the one thing that I agree with is that we in the 118th Congress brought back through our conference rules the regular order, which means that everything has to go through its committee of jurisdiction and then come out of that and then come to the House floor. But I mean, look, if we can't even at least start the impeachment process, why can't we utilize things like the Homan Act, where we basically take the salary of those individuals and we drop it down to $1 a year? These people shouldn't be getting paid when they actually aren't doing the job that they were actually put in place to do. And so until they can actually have an impeachment inquiry and then trial and have the depositions in place at a minimum, just like if a person in a regular, I think about this from the regular world. If you do something wrong in a job and they're investigating what you did wrong, in many cases you get you basically get leave, from the job for a certain period of time, but you're not being paid during that time. You haven't lost your job yet.
You can also go to jail before you've been convicted.
That's exactly right. See, my whole point is that at least with the Homan rule, we could at least drop his salary down to $1 while we continue to investigate. And
someone proposed this for Corinne Jean-Pierre, right?
We could suspend Bowman pending a conviction on the thing with the doors, the fire alarm.
Very possible.
What's the
but
Homan
will
rule?
they? And they won't. That's the problem.
I mean, look, you got someone on camera committing a crime. I think it's a good point. He should be convicted. But at the same time, there's a reasonable step between, okay, someone's been accused of a crime and there's a preponderance of evidence that they may be violent, so we're going to hold them.
Right.
If they're found to be not guilty, we release them. And we're supposed to have hearings for this. If there is someone who there's no preponderance of evidence he's been accused, well, then you don't even get an indictment. But if you do, then the person is going to be free on bail.
That's right.
So considering Santos, he's been accused. They say there's evidence. Okay, well, you're going to have to prove that. For Bowman, he lied about what he did. The camera proves he lied, and he committed a crime. I would say it's fair to suspend him pending a resolution.
Is this the Homan rule? So how do you enact the Homan rule?
It's essentially a privilege resolution, I believe, that you could put on the floor. But last time that we've tried it multiple times by a lot of us who are true constitutional conservatives who believe in accountability of government, and it wouldn't get the votes.
Okay, so it's just a one bill, one vote kind of thing.
I mean, with some of these things, like I mentioned, potentially impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, do you think there's a point where Democrats would cede, yes, the border is a disaster?
Well, I mean, I think that you even see that from New York City Mayor Adams, right?
Right.
I mean, he's even crying about it. And it's funny that now the sanctuary cities, oh, come on in, we're inviting you in, oh, come on in,
and New York
are the
New
ones
York
that are
was
not
the first to
complaining
be
the most,
like,
right?
this is actually a problem. I mean, DC
exactly
has
right.
said we need help, but they haven't actually.
Well, DC said they needed help, but only after we had to pass things like the DC crime bill to stop the soft on crime catch and release policies of, these woke and these liberal extreme mayors like Muriel Bowser or, even Eric Adams or any of the rest. But like my whole point is that there's more than enough circumstantial evidence for us to be able to move forward with impeachment articles against, if anyone, it's Secretary Mayorkas, because we get the CBP reports. I mean, you're seeing the record high numbers that are coming across. You're seeing an increase in the number who are actually coming across that are on terrorist watch lists. I mean, this is the whole thing. And this isn't people from South America. And that's what people have to understand. 63 to 6,400 Afghans. I mean, 32,000 plus, Chinese from mainland China. You've got people from Yemen. You've got people from Saudi Arabia. There is a dozen plus different countries who are coming through our southern borders. And I don't think that we can say that Secretary Mayorkas is doing anything to actually prevent that, because in fact, he's the same one that went on record to say we don't have open borders.
Right.
It just,
and the
it
Biden
baffles
administration
me.
will say we're doing the best job ever on the border.
Well, but here's a great thing in the hypocrisy of the Biden administration. They'll tell you that they had to repeal Remain in Mexico agreement, or that they had to remove Title 42.
Reinstated.
But then they'll come back to you and say, oh, the entire failed Afghan withdrawal, we couldn't do anything about it. It was already in motion because of the Trump administration. It's the hypocrisy and the lies that come out of this administration is just something I've never seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, that if they call it a failed withdrawal, they should retitle that as surrender, because that's what that was. A disgusting surrender to the strongest military on earth, surrendered to the Taliban.
Not to mention the billions of dollars that we left behind in weapons, defense articles, and we put terrorist organizations like the Taliban, the Haqqani Network, and ISIS Khorasan in a better position now than they ever were before. And let's go back. Why did we go into Afghanistan in 2001? It was because we wanted to stop it from being a safe haven or a harbor for terrorism. Meanwhile, fast forward to the Biden administration, where we actually left them after what I would argue still that George W. Bush and even Obama had these failed approaches that we can do nation building, which is not our role. We're not there to build the nation of others. We're there to basically eliminate terrorists who are actually a threat to America and come back home to protect our homelands. But, let's fast forward that to the point that we did the opposite of what we said that we were going there to do. We actually emboldened and strengthened and armed and trained and even left enough cash to create the caliph if they want. The opposite of what the intent was.
That's why I'm not satisfied with surrender. I think it's going too easy on them.
It is.
I don't understand how you abandon Bagram without informing the security forces.
I think it's treason what they've done.
Yeah, I agree. That again, a surrender would be like, okay, let our forces know we're out.
But
something else is when
we
you
have never pulled our military in our history. We've never pulled our military before we ensured the safety of civilians first. I mean, the idea that we're going to pull our military before we even try and make sure that American citizens are out first to be saved.
But why? But the Bagram thing gets me because
it's against doctrine.
We could have evacuated through Bagram.
Absolutely, we could have.
Okay, so let's say,
and I've been to Bagram multiple times. You could have. Here's the other big thing that you have to understand. We could have simultaneously run two separate airports, right? You could allow the continuation of the civilian HKIA that was going on, and you could have gone ahead and utilized Bagram, which, by the way, could have housed 40,000+ people. We could have done the necessary biometrics health scans to look at our SIVs and others who actually had served with us for over 20+ years, risking their lives, instead of just abandoning and leaving them behind, who are being now methodically killed, one by one. But the other thing is that, what did it have? It had an entire military installation, a perimeter standoff. Yeah. So what ended up happening, and this is where the Biden administration hasn't been answering for this yet, when they shut down Bagram to hand it over to China, and they went ahead and allowed the Bagram prison, which released over 40,000 terrorists who had actually already been incarcerated there,
40,
to be released. Yes. Who had been, which basically plussed up the entire force that was already coming in. Now, What else did you do? When you take a military takeover of a civilian airport, all of those flights, because they were telling all the Americans you have to be out by September 11th. He wanted to tout this great victory on this day. But when he shut it down premature to that, all the people who had civilian flights out on Ariana, Cam Air, Emirates, you name it, those airliners got completely canceled. So there was no more Calm Air that could come in and come out. So they essentially entrapped Americans by shutting down the civilian airport and giving them no safe harbor to be able to get out.
I pulled up the name. It's Tyler Vargas Andrews.
Correct.
He's the dude.
Absolute hero.
He was in a tower, you were saying?
That's right.
And then they were surrounded, or they were people coming at them?
They had already been told that day of what the bolo was, which is to be on the lookout of the individual, what he'd be wearing, what he'd be carrying, a satchel, these types of things. He, while he was up there in the tower, identified an individual who fit that description, who he believes is the actual bomber, the suicide bomber. He then relayed that information back, and someone came to the tower to confirm exactly what he saw from, I believe it was the PSYOPs battalion that was there. And they confirmed what he saw, and then he asked for green light to engage, and no one in his command or even at higher command knew who could actually provide that authority. So no one gave him the authority. Moments later, explosion occurs, and we saw what happened.
First thing, he did a show with Sean Ryan. It's spectacular, and Tyler's awesome, and it's like 5.5 hours long, and everyone should go watch that. The guy's amazing. So is this like obsessive centralized control authority thing like new? Is it normal? Because I would think you'd have somewhere in the lower levels of command that are like at least equipped to give you an order or to respond to your request for action.
Well, you usually, in every scenario I've ever seen, you always have command who can actually issue that authority. And you always have a clear understanding of what your rules of engagement are, what the escalation of force is. And the bottom line is that this was a chaotic, botched withdrawal that endangered American lives. And I can tell you that Secretary Blinken was even given a cable, a diplomatic cable, with 23 members of the diplomatic corps who warned him about this strategy, saying Americans would die. They tried to hide that from our Foreign Affairs Committee until the point that we actually were trying to subpoena, Chairman McCall was subpoenaing Anthony Blinken for the fact that he wouldn't and refused without the redacted lines on it, which was basically the entire document, to show this. But here's what we ended up asking. We asked a woman who had been responsible for filing those types of cables, and we said, in your entire time, and she was almost done with her career, I think she had 17 plus years, have you ever seen, how many of these cables do you get a year? What they call a descent cable. And she said somewhere between maybe 1 to a year on average. And we said, okay, great. How many people usually are signatories on these documents? And they said 1, maybe 2 people. And I said, so it didn't send a red flag when you had 23 people who are part of the diplomatic corps of the State Department who signed this descent cable warning about this withdrawal prior to it happening? So all the signs were there. All the intel was there. There was intel reports, by the way, that even demonstrated who and when and what was going to happen. They even, to the point where the days before they would say, okay, these individuals are moving from this city to this city. Next day, they're now in the city. Next day, they're in the planning phase. Next day, they're now done with the plan. Here's how it's going to be carried out. And then boom, the next day it occurred. So Blinken and Austin can't say that they didn't have the details and the information on how to prevent this. They are responsible, and there's blood on their hands, and there has to be accountability.
I don't think it's a strategy. I don't see any reasonable argument for abandoning Bagram. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
The only reason you would do that is to create chaos, disorder, and intentionally get people killed.
Or unless China and others are trying to tell you that you need to go right now because you're a compromised and corrupted administration, and you're now leaving, by the way, $1.1 trillion in lithium, which is sitting in Panjshir.
You think there's compromise on Biden or the administration? China says, we're taking the base, we're taking the country, and you're getting the F out.
Who was the first person who recognized the Taliban as an actual form of government? Chinese.
China's moving in. They're going for the lithium mines.
100%.
It could also be... It could be compromise, but could it also be Biden just selling
But
American
think about
assets?
it, though, for a minute. Just put this together. You're now handing over a country, putting Americans at lives so that the Chinese can get to $1.1 trillion in potential lithium. And at the same time, what are you pushing for? You're pushing for an EV system, which is based out of lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which is all produced by China
Handing it over to China.
build their economy. These are not, and this is where, being a geopolitical analyst for a long time, You don't look at everything so singularly. You start making the link analysis of, look, this is not a one-off. Look, and this, it's not just kind of this coincidence. In police work, they call them clues. And so what we have to understand is that that's exactly what is going on, is that we are driven towards building China's economy and going to a more China one, foreign first policy, as opposed to an America first policy where we actually look out for our own. And that's because of the corruption. And that's because of what you're seeing being released by Chairman James Comer, Chairman Jim Jordan, Chairman Jason Smith, where they're showing the multitude of layers of corruption and the spider webs of companies and the continuation of this 10% for the big guy and the millions upon millions of dollars that Jim and Haley and Hunter and all of them are getting. Look, this is the most corrupt and most bought and paid for pay-for-play administration that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
So what do we do, man?
We impeach his ass.
Joe Biden?
I'm down.
We hold accountability. We return the power back to the American people. We start actually being true constitutionalists who understand that our overspending, which I've talked about this previously when we were on the, going into the show, but we're running into an economic abyss and we keep acting like we can cut our way to prosperity. You can't. Ask any business owner out there. If you can cut your way to profitability, you can't. Your account receivables have to exceed your account payables. And if they don't, then you're insolvent as a business. The difference is, as a business, when you have to go and get a line of credit or you have to go to a bank, you have to prove your ability to actually pay it back. What American government does is they utilize the American people as a taxpayer who is the bank, but they don't have to justify how they actually pay it back. They don't have to actually show a business plan on what they're actually doing. And they think they can cut their way to prosperity as opposed to focusing on what they need to, which is proper reform on the nearly 73% of mandatory spending that is going on, understanding you have to have a cut strategy, which, yes, that is part of it, to try and make sure that programs and things that we're spending on is no longer doing their purpose or serving their purpose, or is eliminated, but also an economic growth strategy that allows us to understand how do we get that GDP to national debt inverted ratio back to a point where we can even be stable, one, but also where we can back it by tangible assets that allow our dollar and our currency to have confidence across the global market for even the developing nations that are utilizing it.
Who's co-sponsoring your impeachment bill?
With the Lloyd Austin,
yeah,
we had quite a few signatures on there.
Yeah, anyone who you weren't expecting to jump on?
No, actually, it's exactly the type of America First conservatives that you would imagine.
You gave me some crazy numbers before we went live about what every dollar the government borrows, it's what, 70?
So this continues to change, obviously, as every second we get more. But essentially, think about it from this perspective, right? When you hear your representative or your senator talk about how they're making the biggest cuts ever to spending, I want to get an understanding of what that means. Every dollar that we borrow, roughly 73 cents of that, we'll call it 70 cents. 70 cents of that is spent already just on the mandatory spendings. And then as our debt continues to increase, as the actual interest rates on that debt continues to increase, roughly right now, around 11 cents of every single dollar is just servicing our interest payments. And then you look at our defense spending, which I think we can argue, with good understanding that we need a strong military. That's 13, 14 cents of every dollar, at $860 to $870 billion that we're spending on our military per year, which is needed because we don't even have our necessary classes for the Columbus class and things like that for our submarines and others. But that's spent just about, which means that your representative, your senator, the person that's telling you we're making these massive cuts, what they're talking about is we're taking a 20%, a 30% cut. Yeah, you're right. A 20 to 30% cut on the remaining 9 cents or so that you can actually touch. Which, in the scheme of things, those cents that you're cutting on that is not going to get us. Again, you're not cutting your way to prosperity without having an economic growth strategy, without decoupling ourselves away from the adversarial nations, without getting control of our supply chain, our resources, and rare earth minerals that are necessary for us to support an industrial-based build-out. We're not going to be able to do this based on DC status quo, that we're going to spend our way out of this or we're going to be able to cut our way to prosperity. It's a lie.
The numbers add up to like 95% of every dollar we borrow is automatically spent. So of that these are rough numbers, of the remaining 5%, if they cut 20% of that 5 cents, and again, it's like a 1 cent or less,
you're still not getting your way to a way of prosperity.
And they'll tell people they're cutting 20% of the budget of the spending, but it's only of the 5 cents on a dollar. They're cutting 20% of the 5 cents. That's like less than 0.5 of a cent. Like, okay, So that's crazy. Now let's talk about GDP growth. You told me before the show you believe it's energy. I think it's energy. I think we should transition it into a hydrogen-based fuel economy. I'm bullish on this. Coming out of Rice University, they're making hydrogen gas out of recovered carbon trash, hit it with electricity at 7,000 degrees. They flash it, turn it into hydrogen fuel. They're left over with $4.50 of this.
So let's jump in it though. How many oil refineries are in the United States?
Corey might know better than I do.
We haven't built an oil refinery since like the 1970s.
No, but how many do we have?
I think, 2 or 3?
Is that it?
I think so.
Then Ian's idea stands.
I really couldn't.
There you go.
I really don't know the exact number on that, but I can tell you that we haven't built a refinery since I believe it was the 70s. But the bottom line is that here's the issue. I don't think that's an either or, and you always hear this from the left and the right. You know, I'm all for the idea of drill, baby, drill. Look, trust me, I like the idea of continuing to produce fossil fuels, looking at LNG. I like the idea of us basically continuing to look and explore renewables, looking at nuclear, which, by the way, is the cleanest, safest. Everyone wants to argue 9 Mile Island or Chernobyl or, you know, the issue that happened in the, I can't remember the name of the Japanese reactor that was
Fukushima.
Out there.
I got a fact check for you.
Yeah.
The last refinery was built in February 2022. There are currently 129 operating in the United States.
That's a lot more than I actually anticipated.
But it does look like it's, maybe one every decade or so, one every 8 years. What do they say?
It definitely doesn't keep up with our current growth and what our utilization is. I mean, but going back to my point of the renewable, reliable argument, it has to be both. We have to be able to look at multiple things, but we have to understand that if we're going to basically go off of this, gold standard, which we did, I believe it was around 1971 or 1973, I can't recall, and go to the petrodollar, that dollar has to be backed by some type of a tangible production. And that right there, because to your point on the GDP, we had passed H.R. 1, which was a bill that Steve Scalise put onto the floor, which is the Low Cost Energy Act, which basically gets us back to a more energy dominant position. But at the same time, we passed H.R. 21, which would prevent the president from draining down our strategic petroleum reserves that he has actually done at a record level that we've never seen before. So if we go to this and we start actually producing energy and we back our dollar by this in the way that we should, then every single time, especially if we look at energy output, because I agree with you, Ian, in this, the global currency, which is the whole point, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have continued to modify their constitution to stay in power forever because they want to do what? They want to eliminate the U.S. dollar from the global currency. They want to throw us into hyperinflation. They want to utilize the corruption of WHO and WEF, who, by the way, I co-sponsored the bill with Chip Roy that would actually stop us from directly or indirectly even funding any of the WHO. I think it's a complete, farce. But my whole thing is that we have to start basing our evaluation, our spending cap, on what our energy production is, which also would incentivize every president on the left and the right to produce as much as possible to have the most spending levers. But it would weaken OPEC, who, when they try and threaten us and say, we're cutting our production by 100,000 barrels, we go, oh, great. So the price of oil goes up. We have more money to spend. Great. Thanks for that. So my whole thing is you decouple away from the utilization, but also things like U.S. aid, where we continue to utilize cash diplomacy, where we're sending, for example, $800 million to a country that absolutely hates us, and we think that's going to turn around and they're going to go, you know what, we love you now, America. No, they're going to say, we still hate you, but we're $800 million on taxpayers' money richer.
We're like divorced dads trying to bribe kids into loving us.
And not only that, but think about it. And I don't like to build up anything that another nation's doing that's kind of an adversary of us, but what Russia did with Germany was convince them to get rid of, after 20 years, all of their nuclear and coal energy and be completely dependent upon them. We could actually stop cash diplomacy under U.S. aid, supply low-cost, reliable energy to developing nations, which would also ensure that they continue to stay on side with America. But also, guess what? It's revenue coming into the U.S. It's not us pouring tax money dollars into another nation and continue to send things out.
Yeah, the petrodollar needs to be converted to a hydrogen dollar. I know we can do it. And the oil industries, all you execs out there listening, will turn your oil into graphene. We're not going to stop drilling. It's going to get even better.
Okay, so the reason I asked about how many refineries there were is because, first, before we're going to transition the U.S. economy from oil to hydrogen, you need comparable energy production for which you are able to do it.
That's true.
Right now, one of the big challenges with electric vehicles, for instance, is charging them. And so what you hear a lot about is batteries. Oh, what's the range on the vehicle? Actually, range is no issue for us. So with the Tesla, you park it, you charge it. You never drive far enough to where we even care about what the charge is, because once you bring it home, it's charging. The issue is, if you want to travel far, you need to be able to refill it very quickly. So you do need good batteries. But so adoption is going to come from expansion of technology. Now, as for like hydrogen fuels and fusion or anything else, someone's going to have to be able to run their car off of hydrogen energy, which is going to require an EV. we are not even at the point where people can use EVs reliably because gas, you fill up your car in 30 seconds.
And in some
you're good
ways
to go.
safely, right? Because we saw where, like in Florida, for example, where we were having floods, and these batteries were essentially
blowing up.
They were blowing up.
Crazy.
They
Yeah.
were
Oh,
endangering
man.
people.
These things- so-
we really need to think about also just the safety and reliability. And Ronnie Jackson said this the best. He said, "Look, it's a simple thing. I'll take reliable over renewable." And
Right.
again, I think that it has to be both. I think we have to be able to have an understanding and a choice for every single American, which is why, we just voted down, by the way. The Biden administration wanted to force every American by 2032 to go completely to EV.
Right.
And luckily, we in the House, I don't know what the Senate will do with this, we voted it down because we believe that just like whether it's medical freedom, whether it's school choice, we are supposed to be providing freedom, liberty, and protection of the rights of every American people, not telling them you need more government in your life.
The issue with the renewables is that they're, as you described, not as reliable. So with chemical energy, with petroleum, the reason why I don't see the U.S. getting off of a petroleum economy is because it is a dense, extremely dense chemical storage of energy, which can be utilized whenever.
Yeah, it's fuel. There's only 3 elements that can function as fuel. It's hydrogen, carbon, and plutonium. And so we're using the carbon in the oil, but we can use the hydrogen fuel. It's just transportable. If you can put it in a box and move it around, it becomes a fuel. Like producing steam is not fuel.
But the issue is with, so there's theoretically hydrogen cell. You
Yes.
can do hydrogen tanks in cars.
And if those could charge
that
the
would-
batteries.
And so, but you can do hydrogen combustion vehicles, which people have, and they're really cheap to operate, or natural gas cars. And then you need to retrofit every single gas station, and you need to build the refineries.
Or you can build engines that are hybrid hydrogen petroleum engines. And so you could use either. I think
And
that's
see,
where
at
we're
At the end
going.
of the day, you know what I want? I want people to be able to heat and cool their houses at a fraction of what they're using right now. I want fuel prices for whatever it is that you drive to be affordable for every single individual. And I want us to get away from the idea that we're continuing to stay reliant on adversarial nations.
I
How
agree.
we get there is, I'm less concerned with it as much as needing to get there and finding the solutions.
I want to jump to the story from Barron's. U.S. military holds exercises in Guyana as border tensions soar. Oh boy, I'm glad the U.S. is down there as Venezuela's building up its military on their eastern front because they're claiming basically half the country of Guyana as their territory. Why? Exxon discovered a bunch of oil. So the U.S., of course, is down there. Guyana has asked for the U.S. to help prevent a Venezuelan invasion of Guyana. Venezuela, of course, just sees dollar signs. Well, not necessarily dollar signs.
And they're one of the
Bolivar
most
Fuerte
resource
signs.
wealthy. They're the most resource wealthy in South America.
They got oil.
Venezuela.
Now they want to steal more. So I guess the two big issues here are welcome to the issue of you're never going to get off oil because it is just too valuable. It is relative to hydrogen or nuclear. It's easy to get. It's easy to use. It can be stored in easy containers.
It is absolutely amazing. And I don't want to get off of it. I just want to build alternate systems that we can use in conjunction with it. Because plastics, maybe we can make better plastics with carbon, but with graphene, you can upscale these things into better materials. But oil is incredible. It is very valuable.
Right. But so the subject I want to get into is, you think we're going to get into another war? You think war's spreading out of South America?
Look, I would say that weakness invites aggression. And we have to acknowledge that. The Biden administration has continued to demonstrate this weakness on the world stage, which is why we are where we are. I think that all of our enemies and our adversarial nations, again, if you go back, I wrote about this years ago about the Russia, China, Iran, and North Korean geopolitical alignment. They're utilizing not just their alignment to try and go ahead and expand out the Belt and Road Initiative or to take the 15 of 16 rare earth mineral mines, but to expose us and drag us into these quagmire wars where we can continue to drain down on what we have as far as defense articles within our own storage capacity and capabilities, what are they're testing for their own intelligence, what our industrial base can actually withstand with regards to production capacity and capability, and whether we could actually stand up to an actual large scale war. But they're continuing to also drag us into areas, because think about it, Venezuela is partnered in its marriage of convenience with Russia. We were actually starting to focus a lot on the Belt and Road Initiative expansion by looking at certain types of a sanction or looking at certain types of a internationally recommended transit corridor for supply chain stuff. What China is trying to achieve is this, and that's why, and it does play into this, and I'll explain this how. They essentially want to take this Belt and Road Initiative, which expands the Eurasian border, takes Africa and Oceania, and that would cut off Western Hemisphere supply chain, whether it's the Red Sea, Mediterranean, Black Sea, Persian Gulf, Horn of Africa, while simultaneously utilizing this marriage of convenience with Russia to take Venezuela with the Chavez of Venezuela, Pedro in Colombia, and then look at economic coercion in countries like Panama and Honduras so that they can actually also start taking over the trade tariff taxes and everything on the Panama Canal so that they could also pinch us there. But they had to draw us away from what they were doing in that Belt and Road Initiative by actually focusing in our own Western Hemisphere. I mean, look, they're also, in addition to all the things that's going on here, they are also building up the largest joint training spy base in Cuba, which is an impact to me as a Florida resident who is 90 miles off my shore. And so this issue that we're seeing in Venezuela is nothing more than that continuation of that Belt and Road Initiative or that geopolitical alignment between China and Russia, where they're trying to draw us into more of this while they continue to do a resource grab. And to your point earlier, to tie this in a bow, that's because it's not about the US dollar as the global currency or the real or the dinar or the yen or the ruble or whatever. Energy is the global currency. And who has the most wins?
Specifically fuel. It's fuel because energy can be produced locally but can't be transported, like nuclear power plants can't transport properly to Afghanistan, whereas fuel can be picked up, lifted, and moved.
Pretty simple. Get our GDP to national debt ratio inverted, secure our borders, stop the wokeism, get our industrial base build out, start thinking about energy dominance. We have to start just thinking about the priorities of government.
Do you think that the U.S. could handle a large-scale war right now?
I think that we could handle a large-scale war, but I don't think that America is ready for a large-scale war.
What distinction are you making?
Well, I look at what our industrial base capacity and capabilities are as far as build out. I look at the fact that we're already spread so thin and trying to continue this, as I talked at, and I kind of ridiculed, which rightfully so in my opinion, this neoconservative, neoliberal 1980s style, of interventionist ideologies that we have to be involved in every war and we have to actually go and make it from a kinetic perspective. I think that we showed our hand the other day whenever, and I voted against it, obviously, but we voted on sending cluster munitions over to Ukraine. Do you know why we actually were starting to dump our storage of cluster munitions? Because, and this is something that's been banned by over 100 different nations, because you have a roughly 1 to 5%, I know it's a wide range, but it's depending on the producer, 1 to 5% dud ratio, which means that you have more UXO, which means you're going to have larger civilian casualties at the end of it. And so we stopped utilizing the clusters, but we did that because our industrial base with the resources and, the capabilities couldn't keep up with what was necessary for the HIMARS and ATACMS and the other areas for 155 artillery shells, things like this. And we're starting to get into what we call our tamer requirement, which is our own munition requirements, and starting to drill into that. And so, we're showing, and again, this is the brilliance of what China and others are doing, which is that they're exposing some of the weaknesses by dragging us into wars that they're not paying a dime on to try and go ahead and look at where our weaknesses are, so that if they do choose to take Taiwan or they do try to go ahead and bring us into the Western Hemisphere, into Guyana or into these things, that we actually, they know what our capability and capacities are. And so, we have to be better. And we also have to understand domestic and foreign policy is intrinsically linked. What we do domestically impacts us internationally and vice versa. And so it's really important for us to try and understand that we have to get our supply chain back. We have to get our resources back. We have to start actually harvesting ourselves. I personally am a big fan of the idea of doing deep seabed harvesting. The earth is 70% water, and there are more natural resources, not talking about drilling, just talking about deep seabed harvesting, mineral harvesting. There is more at the 10,000, 12,000 meter depth levels than what you could find in these 15 of 16 rare earth mineral mines that China has. And China, by the way, controls 100% of manganese production across the world.
Sorry, I'm going to pivot slightly, but were you always a conservative, or did your time in the military sort of shift your perspective?
I have been a registered Republican my whole life and a constitutionalist my whole life. Look, I tell people all the time, the only reason I'm a registered Republican is because we're stuck in this two-party system, and that's the one that essentially is the closest to my conservative values, right? It's not 100% aligned. I think that we've gotten away from the constitutionality.
Do you have to be registered with a party to vote in a primary in Florida?
No, I mean,
because I grew up in Connecticut and you did, so I registered as a Republican.
A lot of NPAs, they are excluded from primaries. But my reasoning is that, there was times when we actually had great Republican members. We still have some today, not to say that we don't. But I also think that we're seeing a mass exodus, by the way, of members from Congress.
It's weird.
But it's actually, I think it's a good thing. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't sound good because it doesn't have the numbers that we need, but we're ushering in a new generation of conservative. And we have evolved back to the ways of being a true constitutionalist, being a fiscal conservative, understanding that we represent the American people, being a statesman, not a politician. Look, I've been called almost everything in the world. The most derogatory term that you can call me is a politician. So, my whole thing is I just want to get back to we the people. And I think the only way you do that is through limited government and an understanding of what actually is the America First agenda. And so this is where President Trump, and I've endorsed him from a long time ago, I believe he's exactly what we need in the nation right now to get us back on track to make those bold course corrections.
Yeah, you said deep sea resource harvesting?
Deep seabed.
How does that work? Is that like with drones?
You can do it with drones. And here's the great part. I still think that we should be utilizing the quantum space where, for example, do you remember when Reagan had bankrupted the Soviet Union with the space race?
No, I didn't know he did that.
Yeah. So we should be also thinking about the idea of how can we actually get China involved in a quantum race whereby they also, because their economy is worse than ours. It's just that the reason that people still prop up their currency is because they don't allow their books to be audited. They lie about what they actually spend and what they actually have. And so we could try and we should try and bankrupt them through a quantum race whereby, being the first to have AI self-healing autonomous drones utilizing like quantum linkage, would be something that we would try and advance in. Again, the idea is that if you could get something in a swarm drone technology through quantum linkage that essentially is beneath their satellites but above their GSM tower providers, you could kind of leave someone blind, deaf, and dumb on the battlefield.
Great to communicate through
and
crystals.
So, the idea is that I think that there's ways for us to start thinking about it. And this is why I argue, again, it's not just looking at kinetic warfare, but it's thinking about the ideas of economic, resource, supply chain, cyber, and quantum races. That is the actual way not to include or not to miss out the fact that it's also the information and propaganda and information campaigns that's going on.
What makes me nervous with artificial intelligence, autonomous drones with weapons is if they get hacked. I mean, obviously that's the threat, and I'm sure China's going through the same thing right now. But the thing is, I guess whoever builds it first, and if you've got quantum encryption. The quantum encryption race also is insane because whoever gets that can crack open all the bank records of everyone in the country and release them all the next day.
And the speed in which and the capacity of quantum data computing is just.
But I agree with you. We do need that race because it's dangerous to have autonomous, artificial intelligent drones with lasers, but that's where it's headed. So we need to win the race.
Yeah, that quantum entanglement that everyone's trying to rush towards.
I want to ask you if you expected Kevin McCarthy to resign.
I actually didn't. I didn't know it was going to take him this long.
Yeah. So you were like,
well, he's saying end of the month.
No. What I'm wondering is did you guys have a poll going? And you were like,
well, they
did the squares.
Yeah, we weren't doing calendar bingo, but I can tell you that I assume
because you're not allowed to. It's against the rules, or because
no, just because we have other things to do.
When it was announced, was the pizza party held for lunch or dinner?
I think instead of a pizza party, everyone was there's probably quite a few offices that was toasting and cheering, and
I don't think anybody. Honestly, nobody cared. The news broke, and we kind of just shrugged and ignored.
But then again, you have people who are still in office right now who are just we still want him as speaker. We're not willing to give up. We're not. I mean. So
later, it's too bad.
And McHenry announced the day before, and they're supposed to be sort of allies, right? So it seems like there is an exit,
I like Patrick. Patrick McHenry. He was always getting ready. I mean, he's at the end of his ability for chairmanship in the financial services anyway. But a really smart guy. I mean, truly a smart guy.
He still has another year to go. He doesn't leave.
Right. No, he's not going to just try and abandon the seat. I'll tell you though, and they can think what they want, but I thought the tweet that broke the cycle for me a few days ago was by Matt Gaetz when he tweeted out Mick Leavin.
Mick Leavin.
Yeah, it was like a little tagline.
You saw the community note on his tweet?
I did not.
Where he was like, I will never quit, and then it was community note that said he just quit.
Oh, that's right.
Community note on his tweet saying he wouldn't.
Was he disliked? I mean, this is all anecdotal. I don't know if you can really answer.
Well, he was pointing out a lot of people like him, so I mean, it's
did. Oh,
yeah. I mean, look,
because I've heard he's a really nice guy, cool and personable in person, but just wasn't getting the job done.
Well, look.
No, he was getting the job done
for the other people,
for the corporations and for the lobbyists, right?
Well, at the end of the day, I think that if we could have actually achieved what we had originally agreed upon in the first conference rule agreements, when we came out, where we are going to do regular order, we are going to have certain priorities of, getting things done. For me, what really just kind of broke confidence and capabilities was when we had the debt ceiling debate. I was all for the idea once we had gotten permit reform in place and the REINS Act, which stopped overregulation of the private sector, and we had a very fixed number at 1.471 of spending cap, which would have been a very good spending level because that would have been pre-COVID, pre-emergency 2019 spending levels. I understood the intent of that because we were going to try and do a policy rider with HR 2 to also secure our borders. When we approved that, we got that passed. When it went to the Senate, and what came back was that absolute, just complete acquiesce with the what they call Physical Responsibility Act, which is Fiscal Irresponsibility Act. That basically took the 20 plus permit reforms down to 4. That stripped out Cat Camex's REINS Act, which would have stopped, because I'm one of those odd individuals who believe that the private sector should be driving policy more so than policy driving the private sector. But also the fact is that it's not as if we have a lack of legislation. We have a lack of the ability and the willingness to enforce existing legislation. But every single member of Congress wants their name on a piece of legislation. Everyone wants to try and play political football instead of going back and looking at certain bills that no longer serve their purposes and looking at reforms, as opposed to just continuations of these vague and ambiguous bills that get passed that won't serve its overarching purpose or has no sunset clause in it where we would actually have to be forced to reevaluate it. And so I could go on and on and on. Look, this is my first full year in January that I've been in Congress, but I can tell you that it was a lot more of a broken institution than I even understood when I was running for Congress. And I think that we have taken this entire time, many of us who are in there who are true constitutionalists, to try and bring back what our Constitution and what our actual Congress is supposed to be doing. And an old saying that I've heard recently, which I love, which is that, change in the beginning, it's very hard. In the middle, it's very messy, but in the end, it's beautiful. And we have to understand that we're in that process.
I want to jump to a very weird story. I think it's important. This is from The Economist. 1 in 5 young Americans think the Holocaust is a myth. Our new poll makes alarming reading. So they released this poll, and you can see 18 to 29-year-olds, 20% believe the Holocaust is a myth. 30 to 44, it's just a little bit less than 10. 45 to 46, floating around 1. 65 plus, almost 0. The Holocaust has been exaggerated. Same stats, basically. Slightly more 18 to 29-year-olds, just over 21, maybe around 22 or 23%. And then about the same numbers for the other demographics. I find this fascinating in light of what we just saw with the universities. So this all makes sense.
And I love, by the way, that Elise Stefanik absolutely just eviscerated those presidents.
This is a tweet from her. She says, I was proud to co-lead the 2020 bipartisan Never Again Education Act to provide K-12 federal grant funding for Holocaust education and have been co-leading the bipartisan reauthorization this year. But these numbers from The Economist are absolutely appalling, chilling, and unacceptable. I'm not here to tell you what your opinions should be on any of this stuff, but I will. But my point is this. The universities ban pronouns.
Right.
They ban misgendering. They say fat phobia creates an unsafe environment. If you state facts that are offensive to the individuals, they will come after you. This is what we saw. The Free Press, as Barry Weiss's organization, put out this video. And then they defended and said, if you call for the genocide of Jews, well, now we got to talk about the Constitution.
Right.
You can see where their views align. And you can understand then why you're seeing these two things play a role.
Correct.
Why are young people so likely to believe the Holocaust is either a myth or exaggerated? Because these professors.
That's right.
Why are these professors willing to defend, under the guise of constitutionalism, the right of students to organize protests calling for the genocide of Jewish people? Because they hold these views themselves. They will ban speech that offends their power and then run and cry and hide behind the Constitution to defend the speech they like. The bigger picture here is universities, social media are subverting the young people in this country to make them oppose the worldview of the United States, our own histories, and thus, what you got to understand about this data right here, it doesn't change.
Yeah, but
18 to 29-year-olds in 10 years will just be in the 30 to 44-year bracket.
Right.
And so
your 65-year-olds drop off and the bracket just continues down.
So what we need is making sure we win this culture war.
Yes.
To shift things back in the direction of pro-America, believing history, things like that.
Well, and again, I've been arguing that one of our greatest threats as well is that culture, social, and religious warfare that we're seeing here at home. And that really starts with the indoctrination that's going on in our schools. it's also, as I was speaking yesterday at one of the gatherings, I explained the fact that, it's intentional that we've been removing civics from our schools because we don't want the younger generation to actually understand what their civic duties are, how to hold government accountable. And so all of this, in my opinion, is just this indoctrinated theory of how they're actually doing things to try and weaken the American values and essentially American exceptionalism and what we actually stand for as a nation.
Who's doing it?
I mean, these professors, these universities, these large donors, the George Soros of the world. I mean, this is all part of it. I mean, your huge endowments and who those actual alumni who are donating into that are actually, I mean, they would rather focus in on the things like ESG, CRT, and DEI, and meanwhile strip out one thing, which is GOD. And so that's what we have to start thinking about.
Well said. I think that some of these 18 to 29-year-olds might be trolling. I don't know how many of them were actually polled, but it sounds like something an 18 to 29-year-old might do is troll the internet and be like, yeah, I think it was fake. But like, okay, it is important to see World War II from the German perspective, for sure. It is. I was taught purely American perspective growing up. It's nice to see both sides, but I think I cannot dispute that these people were massacred, that the Jews were rounded up on trains and sent to like concentration camps and starved to death.
Do you think it speaks to Gen Z's cynicism that they just don't really believe in anything anymore, including history in any way it was presented to them?
And the way Nick Fuentes has fun with it. He's like, yeah, whatever. He just says it because it gets a troll out of people.
It's not just that. It's
sorry, Nick.
When you have the Women's March, the organizer of the Women's March. You had Tablet Magazine release a story where they're espousing insane conspiracy theories about Jewish people. There's a meme, a joke about to figure out which political faction you are, simply insert whichever group you hate into the following sentences. And then it's like blank are responsible for all the world wars, blank control the corporations, blank do X. And it's just like you can choose the 1%, white privilege, Jewish people, the Chinese, the Russians. And then you figure out which
octogenarians.
Yeah, it's basically just kidding. Who do you hate the most? And you found, So what's happening is you have in universities, these professors, we've seen this, that woman from UPenn doing the Kubrick stare, you know what that is? It's where you tilt your head down and look up and smirk. While she's being asked, is it against the rules to call for the genocide of Jews? She does the Kubrick stare, smiles and goes, in certain contexts. It's like, this is a person, these are universities that have said, you better not use the wrong pronoun or else.
Well, but it's interesting that as you pointed out earlier, and correctly so, you're talking about how it's, we don't want our students to feel, shamed. We don't want our students to feel at risk. But what about all of the Jewish students right now who are actually saying, I don't feel safe on my campus anymore. I don't feel safe on my universities. I have threats against me. And we now have people who are actually not just being, investigated, but have actually been arrested for making threats towards other Jewish students. I mean, what about their protection? What about their voice? What about their rights?
And I'll stress, I always give my free speech position is students should be allowed to protest as long as they're not harassing someone. So they're hiding behind the Constitution in a way that free speech advocates would agree with.
But my point is that
the rest
free
of their
speech
positions
is only working in one direction. And that's the issue that I have with the universities. They want to say that it's okay for you to do one thing, but then if someone says something that's against your political view, you believe, then it's not okay.
Which exposes the hypocrisy.
Correct. That's my point.
The point I want to say right now, just to get it across, leftism is overlapping with Nazism to the greatest degree of any political ideology that exists. Not fascism, Nazism, explicitly. Fascism, you can make an argument about like what were they actually speaking to as a political ideology. Nazism was like, yes, plus they wanted to kill Jewish people. So when you add this into it, and you've got professors that are effectively, it was the late David Graeber. He hated this, but they called him the anarchist anthropologist. He said that elements of the left have adopted the fascistic moral framework of there is no truth but power. It's like, I agree with you there, David. And when you add into the fact that they hate Jews and don't believe in the Holocaust and want to defend the right to call for their genocide, I think now it's Nazism.
That's one of the things that set the Nazis aside as a fascist organization was their ethnocentrism. They were obsessed with white supremacy. So like seeing people talk poorly about a race in any way sets my alarm bells off.
And so which political faction in this country wants racial segregation again?
That's what I'm concerned with. If any of them want any form of it, it becomes very, very dangerous.
Let's go back in time. California was trying to amend their constitution to allow for segregation based on race in public contracting and education. This was back in like 2018. They lost. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a liberal, lefty, prominent Hollywood person. And, they had posted a comment in support of it. I had posted a comment saying, like, this is shockingly offensive to someone who comes from a mixed race background, that you would allow them to hold this against me. So she calls me and she's like, what do you mean? That's not, no, we're trying, what they wanted was affirmative action. We want universities to be able to help people who are underprivileged. And I was like, how many, what's the population demographics of California? And it's like, oh, it's like 70 something percent white. And I was like, so your argument is that white people are privileged, are racist, inherently racist, use the systems of power for their benefit. And now you're arguing that white people should be allowed, the majority should be allowed to discriminate against anyone based on race in public contracting and education. And that fixes the problem?
It's such a hypocrisy. I mean, the way they handle themselves.
It's publicly hypocrisy, but when you understand what they want to do, you understand it's not hypocritical at all. It's exactly what they want. They want racial segregation. They want ethnocentrism, or identitarianism is probably a better way to put it. Or I think ethnocentrism is probably a fine way to put it too. They want race-based law. And when you add in the fact they hate Jews, and they're Nazis.
The Nazis specifically were like Aryans first. They were obsessed with propelling one species. I almost said race is such a silly term anyway. It's not even a scientific term. But then like the Jews and the Gypsies were like got the brunt of the hate. But it was everybody. If they weren't Aryan, like they were second class or less. And so it's either you're going to say this race is the best, or we have to kneecap that race. Either one is leads to that totalitarian Nazism crap. And so I'm all about equality of opportunity, man. I understand some people's ancestors didn't have a lot of nutrition, maybe because they were born from slave camps, like 1860s. All these slaves let out of the South happen to be from one area of the world with a certain type of genetics, and so their kids don't have good education because they didn't have good education. They didn't have good nutrition because they didn't. So maybe their brains aren't getting what the nutrition they need to really have brilliance. That's real. That we got to address that too. But it's like in a free society where it's kind of up to you to make the best of it, and like you got to trust. Hopefully, you have good parents. It's you can't like legislate the solution. You can't throw money at it.
Yeah, I do. I think that there needs to be change at home on the family level, right? All of these things we could say this is an issue, this is a problem, but ultimately, unless you have strong families, nothing else matters. And we see this replicated throughout American society, right? We are less engaged with community organizations. We attend church less regularly. We are stripped away of all the things that used to give us strong tenets of culture and, again, drive people back to their families. And that is ultimately something that needs more than a legislative change. It needs a psychological change in the homes of every American.
Well, and again, thinking of someone who, for example, if you look at my background, my mom and dad both had drug and substance abuse issues and were in and out of prison pretty much my entire life. My dad did almost 30 years in prison. My mom did almost 7.5 years in prison. And I kind of bounced house to house until I was finally adopted and taken in by my grandparents, who and again, just a regular blue collar family. My grandfather was a welder. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom who would do hair on the weekends. She had taken her classes through cosmetology school, so she'd do hair on the weekends after church and things like this. But, your socioeconomic status doesn't define who you are. I mean, that's the whole point of the greatness of America, if you will. And I think that's one of the things they're trying to water down and dilute. And I think a lot of people also have this issue of self-victimization where they just basically say, well, I can't do this because of my upbringing. Well, I wasn't born into money. I mean, we were thriving right above the poverty line. I mean, I can remember when my grandfather had a quadruple bypass, and he couldn't work any longer and he was disqualified even though he'd had 5 heart attacks from receiving any type of disability benefits. I mean, we lived for an entire year on around $6,800. I mean, there was a lot of rice, tomato gravy, cornbread, and, which now I absolutely crave when I go back home, but the whole point is that, there's this self-victimization that also is going on in our country that we have to break and understand that, we are a nation that believes in equal opportunity, not equal outcome. And that's the difference, in my opinion, between equity and equality, and the difference between what the left and the right is trying to bring to the table.
That's why I asked earlier about Gen Z being so cynical, right? I mean, Gen Z, especially teenage girls, report high levels of hopelessness. There is a change in this generation that I think is really profound, the fact that they just do not believe in anything anymore, and they are expecting the worst always. I think there is a culture, especially among progressives, that believe they are victims and that the system should change for them. But generally, on either side of the aisle or on either side of the issue, there is just sort of this sadness with the youngest generation.
I don't know if it was Ian or if it was Tim who had made this statement, though, but how much of that is also just trolling with the Gen Zers, So,
I don't know. I'm referencing a study that the federal government put out with teenage girls report high levels of hopelessness and depression. So it's more than just one randomly trolling one poll. Right. It's definitely different, and I think that's why you need more people like you out there saying, "This is how I grew up and this is what I did." Because I think there is just
the same thing with like Byron Donalds. I mean, Byron Donalds was raised by a single mother in New York, and they didn't have the best of things.
Well, and all of these kids are online where the algorithm feeds them more victimhood or more depression, right? As soon as you start reading sad stories, it'll feed you more sad stories.
As opposed to, I'm not going to allow there to be a glass ceiling. I'm going to go ahead and break through that, and I'm going to continue to go ahead and define myself by what I'm willing to do, creating a work ethic, to understanding, what we need to be doing to try and achieve. But also, I used to, people would say, well, when my father got out of prison, years later, I think I was 26 at the time, and he was making an apology, and he had said, I'm sorry I couldn't have raised you to show you like what it was or what the right thing was to be a father, things like that. And I said, no, you did. And he said, well, how is that? And I said,
by doing the opposite.
You showed me exactly what I don't want to be when I grow up. You showed me exactly what I want to do opposite when I have kids. And so again, we can break that cycle. We don't have to continue to try and self-victimize. We can actually go ahead and say, you know what, I'm not going to continue to perpetuate this. I'm not going to continue to live this way and self-victimize. I'm going to go ahead and succeed because I'm going to build a legacy for my kid and future generations. And I think that when you carry that over, whether it was my time in uniform, whether it was serving in the government, whether it was building businesses and being a job creator, or whether it's being a father, which is the greatest role in the world, I think that it's something that we always have the ability to do what we want. That's what's great about America.
Did you go through a phase when you were young where it felt hopeless and you were like, how life was so like dealt you a raw deal?
I mean, look, there's that phase when you're like this young 10-year-old. I can remember one of the things that was difficult for me, and it was kind of a tough story. Is like when I was 10 years old, I used to have this little suitcase, and I remember it was this baby blue suitcase which had a little boy with kind of a knapsack and a dog, and it said "Going to Grandma's," and it was because I was raised by my grandparents, and I heard that my mom was going to come pick me up, and I hadn't seen her for a while, and as I get in the car with my mom, I can remember like we were driving, and all of a sudden she like didn't want to alarm me, but she was kind of like, first time I understood, oh, by the way, I'm remarried and have another child, a daughter. And so you get into this, well, wait a second, here I am 10 years old. It's like, well, why couldn't you have raised me if you can raise this other child? And so, yeah, you get these areas and these times, but you also realize as you mature and you grow up that all of the things that happen make you who you are, the good, the bad, whatever happened in the middle. I mean, that transitory time when you're coming from your adolescence and you're going through puberty and you're going into manhood and you're understanding what that is. But also I was very blessed. I had great role models. My grandfather is the greatest man I've ever met. If I could ever be half of what my grandfather is, I'd be the greatest man. And so, he understood work ethic and he worked as hard. He understood the old way of living. He understood, we ate at the dinner table until I was 15 years old, and then when he was at work working extra shifts, it was one of those ordeals where my grandmother and I would like sneak off into the living room to watch TV with our TV trays, I mean, but that was the way old America was. That was the way, and no matter how advanced we become, no matter how much things change and we evolve, there's certain parts of our American values and what makes us Americans that we need to hold on and we need to protect and we need to preserve for future generations. And so that's really, part of, in addition to try and get us back to that America First constitutionality of why I ran.
I think this show is kind of like, it's like being present with someone is kind of a big, that's sitting at the dinner table with your family. Cause I'd be like, why can't I just go watch TV or play video games while I'm eating? And they'd be like, no, you have to sit at the table. They never really said why.
Strong family is a strong community, is a strong city, is a strong county, is a strong state, is a strong nation. That's why they're trying to continue with the radical left to attack family, to attack the role of father and mother, to, basically trying to deteriorate the importance and significance of God. It goes back to what we said earlier in the show where we said, we're really, and Tim talked about the culture aspect, but the culture, social, and religious warfare that we're challenging right now. I mean, we're past the phase at this stage where it's not about left versus right, Dem versus Republican, conservative versus socialism. It's really America versus anti-America, good versus evil. And so we have to just acknowledge the fact that that's where we're at in this nation and where we're at in this world.
Do you think people can understand the difference? Do you think they can identify the difference?
I think you can absolutely discern between the two.
I sometimes think that there are evil factions that present themselves as good, and there are people who are tricked by it. They can't tell the difference. And I think probably if you have a good moral compass, if you have good character, if you're developed, you can. But people who are confused or cynical or misled are more likely to be misled.
Do you guys think that Trump is the Antichrist? Tim did some research this morning about it. I'm kind of tongue in cheek because All right. There
It
is.
was funny though. On the Culture War podcast, we talked with a couple guys about whether or not Trump or Elon could be the Antichrist. And
God, we have detectives on the case.
yeah, so the funny thing is, in Jewish gematria, Donald Trump is 424, and Messiah, son of David, is also 424. So people are like, oh, that proves it or something, and like, I don't know. Whatever.
Do you believe in like biblical prophecy and stuff like that, or what's your relationship with God?
Well, I mean, I grew up as a kid who actually shared between half of my family that was Catholic and half of my family that, was kind of Baptist and Pentecostal and just kind of the mix. But, I'll tell you something. We have to understand that our entire Constitution, as it sits, was based upon and founded on our Christian Judeo beliefs. The idea was to create it to where our inalienable rights couldn't be infringed upon or denied. It was to understand the jurisdiction between God to man. And, the way government tries to run, and especially in a dictator authoritarian rule, is they try and make it to where it's almost as if, the rule of God or the inalienable rights of God is afforded to the government to legislate over to then go to man. I mean, it's a complete ridiculousness in where we've gotten. So, we're a nation founded upon our beliefs. And so I think that's what actually certainly grounds me. It's what makes me who I am. And so, for me, I have a very strong belief and a very strong faith in God.
Yeah, the Constitution says that God gives us our inalienable rights from God. So, but I grew up as an agnostic, and that was fine. The country's like so liberal that it's like you can believe whatever you want as long as you.
Well, pluralism exists. I mean, that's one of the things that we protect is everyone's right to freedom to belief, to religion, to thought, to speech. I mean, look, these are all the things, regardless of what. We don't have to all agree upon the same thing in order to still follow our Constitution and be good Americans.
I think it does affect how people view why we have the rights we have, though. If you're like a true atheist who doesn't believe in God, you are basically arguing that our rights are a social contract that we have agreed upon. It doesn't come from anything higher. It's just the things that we believe and collectively decided that we are going to maintain.
But we should also understand as Americans that we also have a social contract to our Constitution. We have a constitutional duty, a civic duty to uphold and protect this nation and protect the things and preserve the things that we have for future generations.
That's where economics come in, because I think money's messing it up. Like, my love for God is paramount, but then I'm like, who cares about who cares about getting rich? It doesn't matter if your name's on that bill. Like, let's give grace, do the right thing. But then it's like, no, I actually need to get that guy's money, because we live in a finite money society where you either got to take it from someone else or print it and devalue his money.
That's a corruption of power. That's a corruption of money, the greed. I mean, that's something that's always existed. That's just, yeah. I mean, look, this is the reason why I'm so concerned right now, and you've heard me just kind of ad nauseum about economic growth and where we need to be at and how to sustain and stabilize ourselves. But, we have rulers right now in this regime, this Biden regime, which is corrupted by the money that they've received, by whether it's the Burisma money, whether it's the money out of Romania, the China money, the Moscow mayor, you name it. But the point is that there's a pay for play in power here, and that needs to have accountability and prevention.
It really just comes down to short-term satisfaction, long-term satisfaction. And it appears to be the tendency for the right is
like the hedonist versus utilitarian purpose.
Well, I mean, look, people who have kids are thinking about the future. Mm-hmm. People who don't have kids want now. The people who want now are typical. They want their dopamine centers hit, so they don't care about anything. Give me the money now. Pay off my debt. Why can't Biden just pay off my debt? Who cares? And then everybody else who's got a problem with that is thinking like, what happens later?
Yeah, sustainable resources. That's what it's really about. Having sustainable access to electricity.
Well, but again, though, if we had great quality of life, if we had a strong economy, if we had lower costs of living, if everyone was able not just to try and survive, but to thrive, and they could do that on the backs of where they are still working, they are still actually out there, but they're not trying to work in the way that they have to right now because of the 40-year high inflation. Again, this is where government can play a role just into improving the quality of life by trying to get cost of fuel down, by trying to get cost of living down, by trying to strengthen the dollar through great economic growth strategies, by trying to stop us from this interventionist ideology that we think that we have to be the world's police. I mean, there's so much that we can do that would actually help to quell some of the kind of civil unrest that we see, or some of the cynicism, by just trying to improve the quality of life. And that's something that the role of government can actually do.
If you can reduce the cost of electricity by 100, basically by to a 100th of whatever it costs now. So like you start just pumping out hydrogen at profit. We have a hybrid system. It costs pennies instead of dollars. That would mean that the national debt effectively, even though it would say 33 trillion, it would actually be only 300 billion. Like we would legitimately, by magnitudes, reduce the deficit, the value of the deficit. So it's really about the value of the number, not the number itself.
Well, but when we're talking about cynicism, I'm more just focused on the idea that giving people the opportunity to continue to try and, go for whatever it is that they want to go for in this country without, being prohibited from it, and just improving the quality of life for every individual, I think is in itself achievable. But we're so divided, and there's so much partisanship, and there's this continuation of going after one another, as opposed to saying, okay, we have an issue. Let's find a solution that works for the majority of the people here. And it's not just free handouts. It's not this social welfare program that's being weaponized. It's actually government getting in control of costs and ensuring that we have a strong economy. And that's one of the things, going back to the Donald Trump comment. I mean, look, we had a great economy under Donald Trump. We had great foreign policy under Donald Trump. We were holding adversaries accountable. We were securing our borders. We were actually getting to that point of prosperity. We had full strategic petroleum reserves. We had, you go back, we had the Abraham Accords. We had the idea that we were starting to withdraw ourselves from these wars that we never, in my opinion, should have ever been involved in, like Afghanistan or Iraq, or especially Syria, where, myself and Matt Gaetz and many others had voted for the repeal of AUMF, which the authorization of use of military force, in my opinion, is an abdication of our constitutional duties under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, or even the 73 War Powers Act. But my point is that you didn't see, the way it is now under President Trump. And that's why, again, I go back to my original statements that we need a president who is a proven leader, who understands economic growth, because he's a business guy, who understands foreign policy, and he's proven that, and who doesn't have a re-election looming over their head, so they can make the necessary and bold course corrections to get our nation back on track to where we can actually start to be prosperous.
We're going to go to Super Chats. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, and head over to thebestsongever.com to pre-order Together Again, which is our modern version of the fake song. It's a real song,
of the real classic.
The real classic that was charted for 87 weeks. Did you know that, Ian?
No,
87
not until
weeks. That's right, 1967, 1968.
Powerful
Written
song.
by Jeremy Boring, performed by, and I think, I don't know who gets the writing credit, so I'll be careful on that one, because I know it was Jeremy, but may have been Michael, and maybe not. I don't know, Michael. You can yell at me later. But it's Smokey Mike and the God King. You guys should definitely check out their song, which actually is really good. And Jeremy told us the story about why he decided to make this song. The long story short of it is, the music industry is one of the institutions that's been corrupted. And so Jeremy and the Daily Wire crew, and him and Michael Knowles, Smokey Mike and the God King is their group, decided to give a big middle finger. I thought it would be awesome if we continued and took that and turned it into another big middle finger. So we are basically making, I guess you can just call it a parody of modern pop music.
There is
And
a tribute. You guys are making a heartfelt
That's
tribute
right.
to Smokey Mike and the God King.
absolutely.
I think it's the best song Carter's ever done since he's been working
Well, there you go.
there. It's so good.
Produced by Carter Banks, written by Jeremy Boring, Smokey Mike and the God King. So I have no problem saying it's the greatest song ever written, because I had nothing to do with it. So I'm being
Well, you actually did spectacular work as well. You're one of the artists on the song.
but I am being humble when I say it's the best song ever, because someone else wrote it. We're just doing
But it
a
has
cover.
nothing to do with the fact that you're a part of it, right?
Well, I didn't write the original song, so this song was not written by me. We just did a modern cover version of it. So no writing credits
No,
here.
it's a tribute.
But
The tribute. They're showing respect
in
to
the
the
event-
classic, the hit, 87 weeks on the chart.
As they should.
in the
Yes.
in the event we sell 500,000 of these for some reason, then Daily Wire can slap a gold record on their wall, and so can we.
Nice.
That's not going to happen, but basically,
Never know. This song is really, really good.
It is really good.
it's
tough
modern
to-
pop.
Yeah, it's tough to qualify a song without having heard it, without someone hearing it. So when you hear it, you'll know.
Yeah, it'll be it's going live next Friday, but pre-orders are up now, meaning if you go to thebestsongever.com, pre-order on iTunes or Amazon, that sale goes towards our total count for the following week. So we're basically given an extra week advantage to try and knock some of these other contenders off Billboard.
What's the website?
Thebestsongever.com.
Okay, I was writing that article when we did this. That's the hilarious. That's very funny.
Yeah. That's
well,
what
it is
right?
the best song ever, to be fair.
Thebestsongever.com.
A tribute to the best song ever.
Written by Smokey Mike and the God King. Don't look at me. I'm not taking any credit for this
Carter
one.
Banks, the tribute to the best
I am
song.
actually complimenting them when I say it's the best song ever, you see?
Or
We're
you
very
saying
humble.
yours is the best song ever.
Nope.
Wow, it works in both directions.
Nope, I did not write it. And Carter produced it, so it's either praise to Carter Banks or to Jeremy Boring and Michael Knowles.
Thebestsongever.com.
But the video is basically us making fun of the weekend.
That'll be funny because then
modern music.
the next time you release a song, you can use the same website and release it through thebestsongever.com.
They're all the best song ever.
Maybe,
but
I don't
this
know.
one
I
in
would just leave this
particular.
one there. All right, we'll grab some more. We'll grab some super chats. Clint Torres says, "Howdy, people." Howdy, Clint. You have the first super chat. Congratulations. Josh Burke says, on the Venezuelan thing from last night, something similar is happening with Ethiopia and Eritrea. Oh boy, World War III. You got Middle East, you got Eastern Europe, you got a budding, East Africa.
Indo-PACOM.
And where?
Indo-Pacific Command. So
Oh,
all
yeah,
around that
yeah.
area.
Oh, yeah, China. Come on. Wow, we're getting ready for it, huh? All right, what do we have? We'll grab some more super chats. I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says, is everyone okay? In reference to the first story, I actually was messaging Hunter. They're okay. Only the perpetrator is lost their life. His girlfriend was hurt, but it's not too bad. And
It's non-life-threatening injuries, what the police said.
yeah, there's photos of it. They posted photos of it. And this crazy story. I mean, one of the things that struck me is the use of AirTags. The guy was secretly putting AirTags somewhere, I guess in their car or something.
I've actually heard this fairly frequently of girls who have like soccer boyfriends that they'll like, bug their home, or they'll like put AirTags in their vehicles or in something that their purse if they carry it around every day. It's very scary and sad. It's part of the problem with technology and domestic violence.
I guess according to the texts, the purpose was to locate Hunter's his home, to figure out where he lived.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what
And
he did.
she was going, and
Right.
And
when
it
she'd be
obviously
there.
worked.
So yeah, this is crazy because one day we and a bunch of it's Friday nights afterwards, we take a bunch of people and we'll all go hang out at the casino for a couple hours or whatever. One day when we came back, my iPhone gave me a warning saying you're being tracked by an AirTag that is not registered. And the scary thing is you go to the casino, you park your car, someone slaps an AirTag on your car, watches you the whole time, or like they'll have a buddy in the parking lot and then they'll basically mark your car if it's a nice car. Then they follow you home. But then in the middle of the night, something bad happens. And so it turns out it was just someone else who had an AirTag, which, but it was freaky nonetheless. My phone vibrates and it's like, you have been tracked by an AirTag, and it shows the location of the casino to my house. So the crazy thing is it didn't show my house to my house, which would have been fun. I'd be like, oh, okay, someone here has one. And so it was, I don't want to explain what we did security wise, but security things occurred. And then we cleared it and we were like, wow.
You said it was an iPhone that warned you?
My iPhone sent me a warning.
That's
You're
crazy,
being tracked
'cause
by an AirTag.
I don't have an iPhone, and that's like, is that
Yep.
a national security threat that Apple can make little tracking mechanisms, or is that just the
I mean, it's
inevitability
good
of
for
technology?
like Tim or like anyone who thinks they might have a stalker, right? If your iPhone says, hey, it's registering something that shouldn't be there.
Or
The
if you
question is like, can Android start picking up on that as well?
That'd be cool.
So we'll grab some more super chats. Quispy Joe says, hey, Ian, have you seen the graphene battery durability tests on YouTube?
Negative, but I will.
This guy, he claims to be a graphene
He's the lord of
aficionado.
graphene.
I'm just the
I mean,
messenger.
he has been hydrogen fuel selling the entire show.
He's got some hydrogen right there.
The byproduct of graphene
He's
that's
getting paid by Big Hydrogen.
I mean, I think he's bought and paid
The
for by
sun.
big
for
hydrogen.
every kilogram of hydrogen you make, you get $4.50 of graphene as a byproduct. So you flash the plastic, and then you get the gas, you get the fuel, the gas, whatever, hydrogen gas, and then you get the.
But yet clearly, you
Sounds
build
like
it in
someone who
YouTube.
get paid by
And
the
then this
graphene
stuff you
lobby.
pour into like concrete to make it 3 times more durable. You can put it in car doors to make them stronger, lighter. It's 200 times stronger than steel by weight. And this is just in the bulk version of it. If
Incredible
you-
stuff.
Yeah, man, this is the 21st century building material right here.
All right, Andrew 843 says the Major Richard Starr Act would give service members who are medically retired due to combat injuries their retirement pay. Very cool. Talked about that a bit last night.
That's correct.
Max Reddick says, hey, Tim, do you think you could briefly explain Section 230? I see people on the left say that conservatives are dumb for thinking that companies like Twitter are getting protection as a platform and publisher. Thoughts? Platform versus publisher is completely meaningless and has nothing to do with Section 230. Section 230 gives broad immunities to websites. That's it. There's a lot of people who are like, Twitter, by editorializing, has become a publisher, but that literally has nothing to do with Section 230. Section 230 should stand But Section 230 should be enforced properly in that idea. The idea being if you're protected. So the argument for platform versus publisher is this. We want it to be that if you're a neutral arbiter on the that allows people to speak and you don't intervene in political opinions, then you have protections from liability. However, once you begin removing content you don't like, you lose liability protections. The problem with that is there's certain content that most people agree should be removed or would need to be removed. So then these platforms need to intervene. And that is like basic moderation, violence, privacy violations. I think the easiest one is doxing. Everybody agrees you shouldn't post identifying information of someone else, but it's not illegal to do so. You can go in public and hold up someone's private information, and it's annoying. So in this regard, the argument is if Twitter is so Section 230 says you can remove things that are obscene, lewd, lascivious, criminal, etc., without losing your protection. What we want is for the law to say, yes, you can get rid of things that are criminal activities or are obscene, but opinions, there's the problem. The argument these platforms make is hate speech is an obscenity. Swearing is an obscenity. Therefore, either it's one or nothing. So people on the right are basically saying, look, we get it. You want to remove videos of like child abuse. But some guy saying that he's saying hashtag learn to code, that shouldn't be removed. These companies are arguing that basically child abuse and hashtag learn to code are the same thing. And it's an opinion. So who gets to decide what speech is to be removed and which isn't? So it's a mess. It's difficult.
I mean, a guy saying something like child abuse is great, like that kind of statement technically is completely legal. And in my opinion, acceptable because it's legal, even though it's horrible.
So if someone says, hey, I don't want to be held liable for the speech of the people on the platform, we say, okay, you're immune from the speech on the platform. They say, okay, but we got a bunch of child abuse stuff. Can we remove that without losing our liability protection? Section 230 says, yes, you can. They say, oh, okay, Ian, you're removed too because you said something offensive.
I know, it's crazy. That's not good enough. We need a better system.
Right. So this is a big challenge. That's why people have gone back and forth with just repealing Section 230 outright, which wouldn't work because then basically you could just sue YouTube for what someone else posted on YouTube. That doesn't solve the problem.
You can let the communities kind of take control of moderation. That's what we're experimenting with at Minds, where you have a jury. If someone reports something, it goes to a jury of users on the site that can vote if it's violating it or not. But then who writes the terms of service? I mean, right. Minds terms of service is U.S. law. If it's legal in the United States, it's legal on Minds. Then there's things like spam, which it doesn't correlate to what that means. So you take spam down.
U.S. law is not always applicable to the challenges of the internet.
Let's read this here from Craig Charlton. He says, Everything Cheesecake in Martinsburg wants to connect. They offered a private tasting for the Timcast crew. Check it out.
Okay, I've heard Everything Cheesecake is amazing. I've heard and they moved locations somewhat recently. I don't remember exactly where, but they're a family-owned business. They've been around forever. I stalk all the Martinsburg businesses.
Into it. I like cheesecake.
I'm going to look up Everything Cheesecake.
Yes.
Oh, I found it. Oh, okay, right on. Yeah, our plan for so great. That's on Route 11.
Christmas party.
Yeah.
Route 11 becomes Queen Street. So our plan for Martinsburg is we want to bring a whole bunch of parallel economy businesses to physical locations and make an anti-Times Square. While the number one, the first rule, what was that? You might know this, Ian. The 3 rules for robots. What was it called?
Jeez, I don't know.
Anyway, the first rule is businesses that exist can't be displaced. So if anything that we're doing puts pressure on those businesses, we have to contribute to make sure that they don't get displaced by us trying to revitalize.
3 laws of robotics.
Yeah, Asimov's laws of robotics.
Asimov's. So Asimov's laws of building businesses in Martinsburg is we cannot cause problems for the existing businesses that are there.
Which would protect a lot of our mom and pop shops, which is exactly what we want.
Because we're talking about we're setting up our coffee shop, skate shop, private club, which is currently underway. The private club's probably going to be sooner, and the only reason we haven't done it is because we thought the coffee shop was going to be sooner. But it's been a disaster. It's just been taking so long to get everything done, and it's mostly because contractors show up, present plans, sign papers, announce their scheduled start date, and then vanish and are gone.
Should we do something like create a union of localized businesses for the area? Because if someone goes in there and they set up a shop and then they
like business bureau, lots of towns have like.
I don't like that idea.
But like if someone comes in,
it might already exist.
It's like an HOA or something.
If someone goes in and then they undercut the other businesses, they're like, yeah, we're not going to displace anyone. They go and displace everyone. Like you have no recourse unless it's contractually part of the community or something.
Yeah, I think if you did that, you would have the goal of making an anti-Times Square is that it's going to be attached to the parallel economy. Any business that came in and tried to destroy a business inside it would be trying to destroy the whole project. So I don't think anyone would try and do that because you would be destroyed. Like that, just your business would fail and you'd lose all your money. And
Starbucks is like, it's going to bring $100 million into the community, you guys.
And then they're faced with a massive boycott, constant social media pressure, and why would they do that on purpose? They wouldn't.
Yeah, it's a good.
Unless they're dumb. But yeah, everything cheesecake. We'll have to check that one out.
Trust
that sounds
anybody
great.
when it comes to money.
Oscar Oliu says, damn it, please stop saying guns can be 3D printed. The 3D printed guns that can fire without metal are complete trash. Stop perpetuating that lie. No, good sir, you are wrong. Not only would I disagree, I guess 3D printed guns that can be printed without metal are complete trash. You are misconstruing the argument about 3D printing guns. You can take a CNC machine at home and cut a low receiver out of metal very easily. And watch Infringed on Timcast.com if you like to say. I see you've been a member, so respect and appreciate it. But watch Infringed, and you can see and learn about the 0% receiver. Have you heard of this? 0% receiver. A metal block can be sent to your home. And then if you choose, I'm not advocating this, you can put it into an at-home CNC machine. We actually have 2 of them, I think, and it will cut a low receiver right there. So yes, 3D printing at home, it can be done. I guess you can argue that's not 3D printing. The fact is, the home manufacture of weapons, of guns, it's here. And I got to tell you, man, it's so easy that the average person who wants to buy your standard AR-15, they could easily just buy a 3D printer and at-home CNC machine for half the cost, and then get sent a 0% receiver. This stuff's easy. So when I say 3D printed guns, I'm not literally saying only plastic. I'm saying the at-home manufacture of all parts of a gun can be easily done. And you can make a full metal gun with that at-home CNC machine. So, hey, look, it's here. Cat's out of the bag. What do we have? We'll grab some more super chats. What is this? Alan Shower says, Tim, massive culture war opportunity. Poso v. Hannah B. vis-a-vis Taylor Swift. Why? Because Poso's anti-Taylor Swift.
And I don't know who Hannah B is. My name is Hannah Claire. But
Jack Posobiec is walking into a trap.
Place. Why?
He's walking into a trap. He posted that tweet criticizing Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
That's a psyop.
I thought her interview was super boring for time. I did not think it was that interesting at all. She's just rehashing old stuff. You guys are letting her live in your head in a way she shouldn't.
No.
And I say that as someone who went to her concert.
And this is the psyop. Taylor Swift, a couple years ago, criticized George Soros. Mm-hmm. Why would any conservative in their right mind be like, quick, now we have to attack Taylor Swift? Like, are you nuts? She just accused the Soros family of buying her music out from under her. Mm-hmm. You should be like, we also don't like the Soros family. Maybe we can work together.
Yeah.
Instead, all these conservatives are posting accusing her of working with George Soros. I got to tell you, if you want to make enemies with the most famous celebrity in the world, that's how you do it. Imagine you get knifed in the back by a guy, and then you get pissed off, go online and say, this dude just knifed me in the back, and then everyone comments saying, yeah, but you're secretly working with him, so we don't like you. Screw you. You'd be like, are you kidding me? Where's the support, man? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, your best case scenario with Taylor Swift, ignore. Taylor Swift might come out in 2024 and endorse a Democrat. So be it. Every other celebrity will too.
Yeah.
Don't make enemies. Your best bet is to be like, that's what I'm saying. Look, if you see a Taylor Swift person, like wearing a shirt or whatever, you got instant rapport right now. And she might be going to vote Democrat, and you got to yell at her or him, whatever. Maybe it's a guy. You just be like, I got something in common with Taylor Swift. George Soros, the stuff that he funds, not only did he steal from Taylor Swift, that's got to piss you off, but he's funding these DAs. So I'm right there with her. She was right to call him out.
Tim's
now you're friends with the Swifties.
Every Swiftie to the other side. I love it.
I can't stand that. Like, my opinion on this is the only appropriate political commentator stance on Taylor Swift is, I don't know, I guess. Mm-hmm. Now, okay, fine. Maybe your political commentary overlaps in the music industry, and so you're like, I really don't like pop music. That's totally fine. But it makes no sense that people who aren't attached to this industry are like, oh, Taylor Swift. Someone came to me like, what do you think about Taylor Swift? I'd be like, oh.
Love Song was good.
She got some pop songs.
I mean, what you're saying, which is really kind of what everyone should be looking at, is that you're trying to say, well, hey, look, I'm looking for commonalities, not what separates us. I mean, that was the whole point of like what I took from that analogy, which is like, oh, you were going to tell oh yeah, we don't like what Soros did either. Like you're trying to find that commonality instead of continuing to try and sew into the divisiveness.
Why make enemies?
Yeah,
we got a big opportunity right here. There's a viral video going around where Taylor is talking. They claim it's Taylor opposing Trump, and I'm like, the first and foremost, I don't care about Taylor Swift. It just annoys me that read Sun Tzu, man. You don't go to war with someone you can't win a war against. There is no reality in which any Trump supporter wins a culture war with Taylor Swift. The only thing you can do is isolate her fan base. So your best bet is to ignore at the very least. Or you can be like, man, did you see how the Soros has ripped off Taylor? That's so messed up. Yeah, she's great. That's it. She makes good pop music. I don't know.
Billionaire banker bought her music.
So Scooter Braun and Alex Soros and the Soros family financed the purchase of her master recordings. So that basically gave them the rights to everything that was distributed afterwards. I guess what happened was they spent $330 million on it. She couldn't afford to do it because she didn't think the return was going to be there. I mean, she's worth $1.1 billion, but
she wasn't then though.
But even now, she doesn't have $30 million in cash. So she couldn't buy her own music. Tweeted saying like, these people ripped me off. Fine, hope it's worth it for you. And now because she owns the composition rights, she's re-recording it all.
Oh, cool.
At Kelly Clarkson's suggestion.
It's brilliant.
Isn't that hilarious?
That's awesome.
I'm just like, she put out there's a video that everyone's sharing because they're attacking her, and in it she says, if he doesn't win, at least I tried. Right,
dude.
That means she's supporting Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
We should record something with Taylor for her. If she's re-recording her stuff.
Come on.
No, it's like bullet point.
Greatest song in the world.
Ian will be like, we should get Brad Pitt on the show. I'm like, okay, dude.
Well, I'm not like tomorrow, but I'm saying put it on the bulletin board. Like,
you got a sticky note over there that says Hassan by July.
If Hassan wants to come on, I'm open.
Yeah, there was one about working out, and you went on your fitness journey this year.
I think he was the one that forced me to write that down, or he wrote it down.
I'm just holding you your word, brother.
I put things on bulletin boards in my mind and like say yes to it.
Vision boards. All right, let's read some more super chats. The text vet says, as a combat vet, I would never recommend anyone join until things are squared away. Combat cannot be effective until all the wokeness goes away and unit cohesion and trust can be made priority again.
What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, he's right. I mean, at the end of the day, what we have to understand is that we have to have cohesiveness. We have to have that unity. We have to have that brotherhood. We have to be ready to, walk line to line. And it's interesting that this whole idea of introducing and trying to make the prioritization of DEI as the key has actually sowed in more divisiveness into our military when it should be about us all going downrange together and, looking to try and come home together. So, we are doing that. I passed over 20 plus amendments in the National Defense Authorization Act that targets DEI and that actually looks at the protection of our military to try and get them back to what it really was about, which was back then, increased lethality, readiness, and being properly equipped, not diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's cool. It's much needed, I think.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
I was just gonna say, it's sad to see sort of the way the military has made fun of or sort of mistreated regular Americans, saying, no, you won't be able to see the difference. We'll just push this agenda. And then they started to repeal it when they thought maybe we're going to need to up recruitment levels.
At the end of the day, every one of our men and women in uniform, who I have a tremendous amount of respect and who I will fight to the very end to try and protect and make sure that they have what they need to get back to what it is to serve this country, not serve anyone's political agenda who sits in the office. Yeah. And that's really what it's about.
We got a good one. Wrath says, get Angel Studios to make a Sound of Freedom-like movie, but based on the events of Cory Mills' testimony in Afghanistan and Israel.
I thought the same thing, man.
That'd be cool. Afghanistan would be, I think that's a movie right there.
Would you play yourself in the movie, or would you have someone else do it?
You got to have someone play you.
Who's going to play
Brad
you?
Pitt.
Oh, interesting. I was going to say the same thing.
I don't know. I'm going to try and probably recruit Bradley Cooper.
Ooh, yeah, he'd be great. He's a good one.
He was really good in American Sniper and a couple of other movies. I think he's a good actor. But there was a lot that was in that was very interesting. A lot of people didn't know that right before we were able to get Miriam and her family out. If you dial from an American phone, regardless of where you're at internationally, it'll automatically register as +1. But with a lot of your satellite phones, it'll automatically just take the first number and take it over as if it is an actual country code. And so one of the things that we had to do, since we were getting no help whatsoever from the American government and the State Department was working against us, is that I had memorized all the passport birth dates and had convinced one of the Taliban commanders that was at one of the checkpoints that I was the husband and the father of these 3 children, and memorized their address, their date of births, hospitals, things like this to have proof of life and proof of understanding. And then a guy that was with us who, I'm a fluent Arabic speaker, but there's a guy who is a fluent Pashto, Dari, and Tajik speaker who was with us, who we had convinced that he was just the interpreter. And we played a bit of shell games with the satellite phones where we were calling with the satellite phones because we had just heard that Kabul had got the order to shut down all the borders, and that we knew it would take a while for it to go from Kabul to Mazar-i-Sharif out to Kunduz, these little outposts. And so we had a little bit of time, but we called from multiple phones and had convinced the commander that Yusuf, one of the guys that was with us, was actually one of the negotiators in Qatar. Wow. And that this family was part of that negotiation, and that would break down if we didn't allow these American family out. And so it was interesting because when we went across, we had our full team originally, and they would only allow 2 of us to come over and then take hold of the physical custody of the children and the actual mother. And I can remember the commander on the other side saying, look, there's probably about a 50% chance that they're going to shoot you when you get over there. And my friend didn't find it as funny, but I just said, well, those are pretty good odds. And apparently he had a lot more to live for. But, it was one of those things where when we got them across the border and we'd actually gotten them into safety, and we knew that there was no longer a great risk of the Taliban really trying to take at them, I started getting all these messages on my phone from that Taliban commander swearing, being like, you tricked me. I just knew I should. So it literally was from the time that we had gotten them physically onto the other side. He had already gotten finally that relayed message that no one in or out. And so we just broke it by the edge of time to be able to get that family.
Yeah,
free.
that's a movie right there, dude.
So it was a good.
That should be
somebody
movie.
call Bradley Cooper and Angel Studios.
I mean, well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, definitely Angel Studios. But someone's got to make the film, right? So there's the story.
Someone's got to make the torch and pass it on.
All right, let's see. We'll grab we'll grab one more here. Paul Tascalos, big old super chat, appreciate it. Says, SSRI, antidepressants ruined my life. Began at 30 years old, gained 100 pounds. Emotionally numb, no hope. I wasn't living, just existing, dead inside. Took 12 months to taper off. Severe withdrawal symptoms. Anger, crying for hours. I'm 38 years old now, SSRI free for 9 months. I'm healing, learning to love myself. Don't give up.
That's
God bless you.
Andy?
Wow.
Good luck, man.
That was Andy?
That was Paul Tascalos.
Paul Tascalos? Nice
Paul,
job, dude.
Keep the fight going.
Right on, man. All right, everybody, if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Head over to timcast.com, join us to support our work directly, but also head over to thebestsongever.com. Am I getting that right? Because I barely...
I'll check it right now, but I think that's it.
Thebestsongever.com, and pre-order the song Together Again on iTunes or Amazon. The direct purchase is worth 150 times a single play. It's the best song ever.
It's the best song ever.
Yes.
Like, it has to be the best song ever.
Right, I can't believe we got that URL.
That's funny.
So
Seriously.
freaking hilarious.
The best song ever.
That's Luke Rutkowski's influence all over you.
Best. Well, it was Carter's idea.
Oh my gosh.
And I was
True
like,
music producer being like, here we go. This is the URL.
I mean, it's a Smokey Mike and the God King classic. It's one of the
we
best
have to
songs ever.
honor them correctly.
But so Michael knows we've been working on this for a year. It's been a long time. And Michael was here, and I don't know if he's gonna get mad that I said this, but he was like, Tim, I just want a gold record. And I was like, okay, we got to sell 500,000 of these, but maybe in like 10 years something will happen.
This is a really good song, though. This is one that catches by word of mouth.
Maybe, I don't know. I like it. It's like a modern pop version. We're basically satirizing modern pop like The Weeknd. The music video is basically a spoof of The Weeknd, and the idea was to take Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring's spoof of Happy Together, and then turn it into a spoof of modern music, so that we could basically double up and give a middle finger to the industry and the
well, look, not to say it's the equivalent of, or I'm trying to make a comparison, but I mean, we did see what happened with the great song, the Richmond North of Richmond. I mean, that thing just absolutely exploded.
Well, this song is nothing like that.
Tim's like, don't set the bar too high.
But my point is that it doesn't necessarily have to be some big label. I mean, it could actually just be a group of people who make a really good song, and it just catches fire. To Ian's point.
To be fair, like, you guys have been working on this. You launched a legitimate Trash House is a legitimate label. You guys are really committed to fighting back against.
It was a year
people
ago.
Who hate you.
It was a year ago that I called Jeremy Boring. I was like, Jeremy, I have this idea, and he was like, okay. And then we started working on it in communication with them. They cameo in the video, and it's going to be fun and funny.
Pumped
So
to see it.
Yeah, so would appreciate your support, thebestsongever.com. And Cory, do you want to shout anything out?
No, I just want to go ahead and thank you guys for having me back on the show. And look, I'm elected to Florida's 7th District, but I can tell you, if you believe in constitutionality, you believe in the freedom of this republic, you believe in the ideas of maintaining our inalienable rights and getting back to what it was to be an American, then trust me, I'm still your representative regardless of where you're living in this world.
Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter at Cory Mills FL. And then I've got, I think our Instagram and our Truth is both the same.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming in. It's been a great show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for SCNR.com. That's Scanner News. I'm really glad to be a part of that team. The Whalers have a big game this weekend, so go watch them. That's a complete lie. If you want to follow Scanner's work, you can still follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Instagram at hannahclaire.b, and I'm on X or whatever it's called at HC Brimlow. Guys, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. Subscribe to me all over the internet at Ian Crossland, and watch my YouTube video today with Drew Pinsky because it was awesome. Great interview. Love the guy. Love you, Drew. Dude, Cory, awesome. Awesome. I love talking economics. Thank you for bringing the numbers, going deep. That was badass.
Appreciate it.
Looking forward to seeing you again, man.
Absolutely.
Serge Dupre.
Yeah, Serge.com. Another good week. Ready to enjoy my weekend like you guys should too. Argue with me on Twitter. See you guys later.
Now we're going to be doing work for the Boonies HQ, which is happening this weekend. We got some, I guess we got some pro skateboarder coming out. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Sick.
So we'll be producing more content for you. Follow at Boonies HQ everywhere. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.
Cheers.